Tonight, we're heading deep into Texas country, where December nights run colder, longer, and meaner than they should. From lonely backroads that refuse to stay on the map to voices that carry over frozen fields when no one's there. Get ready for 4 true December nightmares. From deep in Texas country, stories that will make you question every shadow outside your window tonight. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing, and when they do, they miss the creepiest, most unsettling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight is just the beginning, and the things waiting out there in the dark don't disappear when the video ends. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Tell me in the comments, because here, the night is only getting colder and the horror is just starting to unfold. Now, let's dive into the darkness. My name's Travis Hennigan. I'm from outside Bracketville, down past the old highway where the streetlights stop, and I work as a ranch hand out at a place folks call Dry Creek Ranch. And I fix busted fence and small engines when the boss needs it. And I am telling you right now, I have not slept through a full night since last December, and my hands are shaking, trying to hold this phone steady, and I know how that sounds. But I do not care. I just need to get this out where someone can hear it, because I cannot keep it in my head anymore without feeling like it is pressing from the inside, like the walls did. And if this sounds strange, you can call me crazy after you listen, but at least listen, just listen. Because I swear to God, this all started simple. It started like any other day, and that is the part that scares me the most. How normal it was at the beginning. Like nothing was wrong at all. And if I had just called in sick or driven into town that morning, maybe I would still be the kind of man who can stand outside when the wind picks up without feeling like something is leaning in right close to my ear. It was December when it really started, but I should probably tell you about the December before that first, because that is when the voice came the first time. Even if we all laughed it off back then, and I did not think much of it, I really did not. I thought it was just one of those things that families remember later and tell as a joke over coffee. But it did not stay a joke. The December before last, the one right before everything went bad, it was one of those winters where the cold comes in quick after sundown, where your teeth hurt when you suck in air too fast and the sky looks like metal. I woke up that morning same as always. I remember what I had for breakfast because my wife kept teasing me about it later when things still felt normal. 2 fried eggs, toast that got a little too dark because the toaster sticks, and leftover sausage from the night before. I had on my dark green work shirt, the one with the little oil stain on the left side that looks like a handprint if you look at it from far away, and my oldest pair of jeans that were already blown out at the knees. I remember looking at the time on the microwave when I rinsed my plate. It said 6:13 a.m. I always liked being out at the barn before the sun came all the way up, because the animals are quiet then and you can hear the world waking up slow. Back then, I liked that. Back then, the sound of the wind was just weather. The kids were still asleep. My boy, Eli, was in that little back room that never got quite warm, with the Dallas Cowboys blanket pulled over his head. And my little girl, June, was in the room she shared with my wife's old hope chest. My wife, Carla, was sitting at the table with her coffee, scrolling her phone and complaining about some recipe that did not turn out. I kissed her on the side of the head, grabbed my denim jacket off the chair, pulled my boots on by the door, and stepped out. I remember the way the air hit me when I opened that door. Not strange, not yet, just cold. You know that kind of cold where you feel it first, in that little place between your eyes and your nose. The sky was still kind of faded dark blue, and the field lights were on. I could hear one of the horses pawing at the ground, impatient. The dirt in the yard was packed down, and my own boot prints from the day before were still there, frozen in place. Normal. I walked out toward the barn, hands in my jacket pockets, thinking about feed orders and a busted gate hinge. Not thinking about anything big. It is funny how you remember the little things later, like the way my right boot squeaked because the sole was coming loose, or how the porch light behind me flickered once when the wind hit it. I remember the first time we ever heard it was that night, not that morning. And if it had just happened once, maybe I would have forgotten it by now. It was that evening after chores, after I cleaned up and we ate dinner, some overcooked pork chops and boxed potatoes. And the kids were running around the living room while Carla watched some Christmas movie on TV. Outside, it was one of those black nights where the sky has no stars because the clouds are sitting heavy and the wind had started up. You could hear it pushing at the corners of the trailer, whistling through that one bad window we kept meaning to fix. Out at Dry Creek Ranch, the land is pretty open. There is a line of mesquite trees way out past the back fence, and the dry wash cuts across the back of the property. But mostly, it is just space, a lot of space for the wind to run through. Every December, when the cold fronts roll in, that wind gets loud. It funnels right between the barn and the house, and it makes this howling sound that used to keep the kids awake when they were little. We would tell them it was just the ranch singing, try to make a joke of it. That night, though, it did not sound like singing. I was by the kitchen sink rinsing off plates when I heard it say something. I know how that sounds, but I'm not talking about one of those things where people say the wind is talking because it kind of moans around corners. I mean, it sounded like a real voice right there in the gust, clear, like someone shouting from the back fence line. At first, I thought it was one of the hands, maybe Luis or Mark, out by the barn. It sounded like a man calling out. Just one word, long and drawn out, but I could not catch what it was. I stopped what I was doing and looked up, and the hair on my arms went up under my sleeves before my mind even caught up. Carla had the TV playing some song, the kids were laughing, but underneath all that, I heard it roll through again. In between two hard gusts of wind, right along the side of the trailer. It sounded like it was right outside the kitchen window. It said something that time. It said help, not a scream, not a panicked voice, just that word, stretched a little by the wind. Help. I remember turning the faucet off and standing there, dripping water on the floor, listening. I know what coyotes sound like. I know what owls sound like when they get loud. I know the way the wind hits the wires and makes them hum. This was not that. I wiped my hands and went to the back door and opened it. The wind pushed cold air in and made the curtain jump. I stepped out on the little concrete pad and looked toward the barn. The security light over the door was swinging a little. I could hear the metal roof ticking and shifting with the temperature. Out beyond, the dark was just a wall. I stood there a minute, listening. And then I heard it again. Clearer, like the wind took a breath and then threw it right at me from somewhere out past the mesquites. Help me. Same voice, same tone, like it had been saying it for a long time and was just tired. I almost called out who was there, but I did not. I just stood there with my mouth half open and my heart beating too hard. Carla came to the door behind me and said, "What are you doing? You are letting all the heat out." And I said, "You did not hear that." And she said, "Hear what?" "The wind, Travis. It is December." And she shut the door on me because she hates wasting heat. I stayed there another minute, trying to hear it again. The wind picked up, got louder, rattled the metal siding. No words that time, just roaring. I went out to the barn with a flashlight, checked the doors, checked the pens, walked all the way to the back fence line, boots crunching on frozen ground. Nobody out there, just the sound of the wind hitting the grass and a loose piece of tin banging on the old equipment shed. I told myself maybe it was something in the trees or the way the wind rolled down off the highway. I went back in, told Carla I thought I heard someone calling out, and she said maybe it was the radio in the barn. But the radio had been dead for months. That was the first time. Over the next few Decembers, The wind out there started to feel different. Every year, when the cold came back around and the fronts came through, we would get those nights where it sounded like the whole sky was trying to push the ranch sideways. The kids got older, started sleeping through it, but I kept waking up. Some nights it was nothing but wind and creaks, but sometimes, every once in a while, it would sound like there was a voice in it. Always that same worn-out tone, buried under the gusts, like someone talking through a long metal pipe. Sometimes it sounded like it was out in the pasture, sometimes like it was running the length of the trailer. I would hear it say help and then nothing clear for months. We made jokes about it. Dry Creek has itself a December ghost, I would say at breakfast, and Carla would roll her eyes and say, if the ghost wants to help fix that damn window, it can come on in. The kids liked it. They would stand at the back door when the wind got loud and yell into it like it was some kind of game. That was before it started saying our names. Last December is when everything changed. I can tell you the exact date because it was written on the whiteboard by the fridge. December 10th. We had circled it because Eli had a school thing the next day, and we were trying to remember not to schedule any late work that night. That morning started like any other. Same creaky alarm on my old phone, same stumble into the kitchen. I did not even change up my breakfast much. Just cereal that day because we were low on eggs, and half a banana that had brown spots. It was 6:09 a.m. on the microwave when I checked. I threw on my brown jacket because the green one was still damp from the day before. The kids ate toast with too much jelly and argued over the last clean cup. Carla wrote something on a list about needing more propane. Normal, completely normal. I almost feel like I am lying when I think about how normal it was. Like my brain is trying to smooth it out, but I keep seeing the way the morning looked when I stepped outside. The air was colder than it had any right to be. Dry too, like it hurt to breathe too deep. The sky was that washed out gray color that never really brightens all the way. I could see my breath thick in front of me. As I crossed the yard toward the barn, the wind started up from the north in these steady pushes. Not gusts, just a constant pressure, like someone leaning on you. I could see the mesquite branches swaying in the distance. The horses were restless. One of them stomped and shook his head when I walked past. For no good reason. I did my chores, fed the animals, checked the water, hauled a bag of feed that split at the bottom, and left a line of pellets from the truck to the barn. I remember telling myself I would sweep it up later and never getting the chance. The whole day, there was this feeling that something was off, but it was the kind of feeling you can ignore when you are busy. The ranch boss came by around 10 to talk about some work on the back fence. We walked the property, talked numbers, talked about the cold, joked about getting old. By the time the sun started going down, the wind had picked up more. It pressed against the side of the trailer, whistled at the corners. Carla lit one of those cheap candles she liked, trying to make the place smell like cinnamon. The kids were both at the table, doing homework and complaining. The heater kept kicking on, loud, then shutting off. Static popped from the little TV in the corner. I noticed it more that night, all the sounds hitting at once. It felt like the whole place was shaking a little, like the wind was under the floor too. After dinner, I went out back to smoke a cigarette. I know I should not, but I have been doing it since I was a teenager, and I tell myself I am going to quit every new year and never do. I stood on that little concrete step, jacket zipped up, watching my breath and the glow at the end of the cigarette, and listening to the wind run the length of the ranch. That is when it said my name. Not like before, not buried, not faint, clear. The wind came hard around the corner of the trailer, rattled the loose gutter, and in the middle of it, riding on top of the sound, I heard my name in a voice that sounded like it had known me my whole life. Travis, not a shout, not a whisper, just my name, spoken like someone standing about 15 feet away in the dark yard. I froze. The cigarette burned down to the filter between my fingers. My first thought was that one of the hands was messing with me, maybe standing by the barn, yelling on the wind. I squinted into the dark, trying to see movement. The security light by the barn kept swinging, throwing the building in and out of shadow. Nothing moved that I could see. Then it came again, cleaner, like the wind had steadied itself just for that. "Travis, help me." Same voice as the old December nights, but closer, clearer, and this time it used my name. The way it said, "help me," made my stomach twist. Not terrified, not screaming, just tired and sure, like it already knew what my answer should be. I backed up and bumped the door behind me. My mind tried to make sense of it and could not. I opened the door fast, stepped inside, shut it, and locked it without thinking. Carla looked up from the couch and said, "Are you all right? You look like you saw a ghost." And I said, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "Hear what?" And I said my name, outside. Someone just said my name, and the kids got quiet and looked at me. The heater clicked off right then, and the silence after it felt thick. I stood there breathing hard. Carla said it was the wind, Travis. You know how it tunnels out there. And I said no, this was not the wind. It said, "Help me." It used my name. Eli laughed a little, nervous, and said, "Dry Creek Ghost finally learned your name, Dad." And I told him to quit, harsher than I meant to. My voice came out sharp, and the kids both flinched. I felt bad, tried to calm down, but my hands would not stop shaking. That night, none of us slept much. The wind stayed up. Every time I started to drift off, I would jolt awake thinking I heard something. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, it came again, this time outside the bedroom window, close enough that the glass rattled with the force of it. "Travis, please." I sat up so fast, I made the mattress squeak. Carla mumbled, "What is it?" And I said, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "It is just the wind. Go back to sleep." But her voice sounded thin. I got out of bed, went to the window, pulled the curtain back. The yard was a smear of dark shapes and swinging light. I stood there with my forehead almost against the glass, listening. The wind pushed and pulled. Under it, something like a pattern. Words that almost came together and then got ripped apart. I thought I heard the word cold in there somewhere. I did not sleep at all after that. Over the next week, it escalated. The wind would pick up in the evenings, and with it, the voice would come. At first, it just said my name. Sometimes I would be in the kitchen washing dishes, and I would hear it slide along the outside wall, like someone walking slowly around the trailer, saying Travis in this low, steady way that did not sound like anyone I knew. Sometimes I would be at the barn, closing up, and it would come from the direction of the dry creek bed, riding the air up toward me. I stopped going out alone after dark if I could help it. One night I heard it while I was inside the barn with the door mostly shut, just a sliver open for light. The wind blew straight through that gap and carried the words with it, right up into the space above my head. "Travis, open the door." Thing was, the door was already open. Little things started to feel wrong in the house too. We would set something down and find it somewhere else. Nothing big at first. A mug left on the counter would be on the floor in the hallway. My work gloves would be by the back door instead of on the hook. I blamed the kids until I saw it happen with my own eyes one afternoon. I had my screwdriver on the table by the window. I turned to grab a tape measure from the counter. When I turned back, not 2 seconds later, the screwdriver was on the other side of the table, closer to the wall. Nobody else in the room. The air felt heavy right then, like the moment before a thunderclap. There was no thunder that day. Carla said, stress makes you see things. She said December is always hard. Money is tight. Hours are long. The holidays make everyone tense. And the wind out here gets in your head. I wanted to believe her. I tried. I really tried. Then it started saying the kids' names. The first time that happened, we were all in the living room. It was a Saturday, late afternoon. The sun was going down early behind a low lid of clouds. The wind had been steady all day, making the trailer creak. We had the TV on, some football game, volume low. Carla was folding laundry. June was coloring on the floor. Eli was scrolling his phone and pretending to watch the game. I was in my chair by the small window, rubbing the knot out of my shoulder where an old injury always flared when it got cold. The heater kicked off, and in that little quiet that always comes right after it shuts down, the wind gusted hard along the side of the house. It hit the wall by the window with a sound like somebody dragging their hand down it. And right there, clear as if someone had stepped up to the window and cupped their hands around their mouth, a voice said June. My daughter's name stretched just a little, lifted at the end like a question. June looked up from her crayons and stared at the window. Her eyes got huge. She said, "Daddy, somebody is outside." Carla laughed, this forced little sound, and said, "It is just the wind saying hi, baby." But she did not look at any of us when she said it. I went cold all over. A second later, it said Eli. Same tone, same tired certainty. Just his name, carried on the tail end of a gust. Eli's face went white. He stood up fast, knocking over his drink. He said, "That is not funny, Mom." And Carla said, "I did not do anything." And I believed her because I could hear that she was scared too. The TV cut to static for a moment, then came back. The light in the kitchen flickered. Somewhere in the wall, something cracked, loud, like a board snapping. I turned off the TV and said, "Nobody is going outside alone anymore after dark." And Carla did not argue. The kids slept in our room that night with the door shut tight. I pushed the dresser in front of the other bedroom door without quite knowing why. The wind did not let up. The voice came back around midnight, running the length of the trailer, calling each of our names in turn. It never shouted. It never sounded angry. That was the worst part. It sounded patient. It sounded like it could wait as long as it had to. Over the next few days, things started happening inside that I cannot explain. We would be sitting at the table and hear footsteps in the hallway when nobody was there. Not heavy boots, just the sound of bare feet on the thin linoleum. Slow, like someone was walking and stopping to listen at each doorway. Once I heard that and jumped up fast and yanked the hall door open, and there was nothing there. But the air in the hallway felt colder than the kitchen. The kids started complaining that they heard whispering through the vents at night. At first, I told them it was just the heater kicking on and off, the metal expanding and contracting. But one night, I sat in their room with the lights off while the wind howled outside, and I heard it too. Not words I could make out, just this low murmur, like someone talking in the next room. When the wind hit the side of the trailer just right, the murmur would swell up into one word: please. We started leaving the TV on at night, just for noise. I fixed that bad window in the living room with fresh caulk and weather stripping. But it did not change the way the wind sounded when it pushed against it. One Saturday morning, I found boot prints in the hallway. That is one of the things that still wakes me up heavy and sweating. I know what my boots look like. I know the pattern in the mud they leave. I had taken them off by the door like I always do. The kids wear sneakers with a different tread. Carla wears those flat little house shoes with no pattern at all. The hallway floor is old linoleum, worn in places. That morning, I got up before everyone else, went to the kitchen to make coffee, and when I turned on the light, I saw a trail of faint, dusty prints running from the back door down the hallway toward the bedrooms. They were the shape and size of my work boots. They stopped right in front of my bedroom door, and then turned and went toward the kids' room, and then stopped again midway down the hall, facing the wall. There were no prints leading back. Just that one-way trip, like someone had walked in while we were sleeping and then disappeared right into the wall. The back door was locked, deadbolt and chain. No sign of forced entry. I checked every window, all shut, all latched. I got down on my knees and touched one of the prints. It looked like it was made of the fine dust that collects under furniture, not real dirt, and when I pressed my finger to it, it smeared like chalk. I woke Carla up and showed her. She went quiet in a way I had not seen before. We woke the kids and checked them over like they were little, asking if anyone got up in the night and walked around. They said no. Eli looked at the prints and said, "Those look like your boots, Dad." And I looked at the spot by the back door where my boots were, lined up, soles still clean. I did not say anything. That was the day I started hearing it from inside. Before that, it had always been outside, or at least it felt that way, carried on the wind. I could tell myself it was something in the air, something about the way the ranch was laid out, some trick of pressure and sound. That afternoon, I was alone in the house. Carla had taken the kids into town for groceries and to get them out of the trailer for a while. The sky was clear for once, but the wind had not stopped. It rattled the little metal awning over the front step. I was in the hallway, fixing a loose piece of trim. On the other side of the wall was the living room. I had the radio on low in our bedroom, some country station that kept fading in and out when the wind got bad. I had just driven a nail in when I heard my name again, only it did not come from outside. It came from inside the wall I was touching. Travis. No wind this time, no howling, just that same tired, patient voice, but muffled like it was standing in the narrow space between the studs, speaking through the drywall. I jerked my hand back and dropped the hammer. It hit my boot and left a new scuff. I stared at the wall. The house went silent in that weird way where you can still hear the blood in your ears. The radio cut out completely for a second, and then came back with static. The heater did not kick on. The wind outside dimmed like someone turned it down, and from inside that wall, right at the spot where the boot prints had stopped that morning, the voice said it again. "Travis, I am cold." I did not move. My throat felt too tight to swallow. The voice kept talking in this slow way, like it had all the time in the world. "You have to let me in, Travis." My hands started to shake so bad, I had to put them in my pockets. I wanted to yell, to say, "Who are you? What do you want?" But the words would not come out. I backed down the hallway step by step, keeping my eyes on that stretch of wall like it might open up. The air around me felt wrong, like the pressure had changed. My ears popped. A second later, the heater roared to life, louder than it had ever been, and the wind outside slammed something against the side of the trailer, hard enough to make the picture frames rattle. I grabbed my keys and left the house. I stood out in the yard in the cold wind, sucking in air and shaking, waiting for Carla's truck to come back. I did not go back in until they did. That night, I told her exactly what I had heard. I did not leave out the part about it saying it was cold. She looked at me a long time, then said we should call someone, maybe a pastor, maybe someone from town. I said, "What am I supposed to say? That the wind learned my name and moved into our walls?" She said maybe there is something wrong with the wiring. Maybe the radio is picking something up. Maybe we are hearing CB chatter from a truck passing by. She wanted so badly for it to be something like that. I could see it in her face. I wanted it too. I checked the walls for drafts. I checked for rodents. I checked for anything that could explain voice-like sounds. There was nothing. The next night, it called each of us from inside the house. It started about an hour after dark. We were all in the living room, trying to act like everything was fine. The TV was on, but the sound was low enough that I could hear the wind pressing on the siding. The kids were both curled up on one couch. Carla sat in the armchair with her arms wrapped around herself. I sat by the kitchen doorway, where I could see down the hall. The first time, it came from the ceiling vent above the TV. June. The little grated cover rattled like someone had tapped it from inside. June's head snapped up. She pulled the blanket to her chin. Then, from the wall behind the couch, low and right at ear level, it said Eli. He sat up straight and looked around, eyes wide. I could see the exact spot where the sound seemed to come from. No visible mark on the wall, no crack, just smooth, old paint. Then, from right behind Carla's chair, from the inch of space between the wall and the back of it, it said Carla in the exact same tone. My wife went still. She did not turn around. She just stared straight ahead at the TV, which had frozen on a commercial. I opened my mouth to say something, and that is when it said my name again, from the wall by the hallway. The same wall where the boot prints had stopped. Travis. The lights flickered once. The heater shut off mid-cycle. The wind outside cut off like someone had closed a door on it. In the sudden quiet, the house felt like a box with something inside it that did not belong. I stood up slowly. The kids both started to cry, quietly, like they did not want whoever was talking to hear them. Carla said, "Do not move, just stay here," but I could not, because the wall by the hallway was not quiet. It was breathing. That is the only way I know how to say it, even though it does not make sense. There was this slow, in and out sound, like a person trying to stay calm. I could feel it in the floor too, a soft vibration. I walked toward it, every part of me screaming not to. As I got closer, the air got colder. Not draft cold, not leaky window cold. It felt thick and wrong, like the cold inside a freezer that has been shut a long time. I reached out my hand and laid it flat against the wall where the prints had faced. The wall felt warm. That was somehow worse than if it had been ice cold. It felt like the wall was holding heat from something just on the other side of it. The breathing sound stopped. For a second, there was nothing. Then, right under my palm, a voice spoke. It was not muffled anymore. It was clear enough to hear every scrape in it. "Thank you for coming closer, Travis." I snatched my hand back like I had been burned. I said, "What are you?" without meaning to. The kids were sobbing now. Carla was calling my name, telling me to come sit down, that I was scaring them. The voice did not answer my question. It did not answer any question I ever asked it. It just said, "I am so tired of the wind. Let me in." The wall under my hand shuddered, like something had pressed against the other side. The pictures on the hallway wall tilted. One fell, the frame glass cracking when it hit the floor. I grabbed the kids, got everybody into our bedroom, shut the door, and dragged the dresser in front of it again. We slept with the radio on loud and the TV on mute, both of them flipping channels on their own every few minutes whenever the wind hit the house. For 3 days after that, it did not say anything. The wind still blew. The house still creaked. But the voice stayed quiet. That was almost worse. Walking around, waiting, listening, jumps at every little sound. I stopped going to the far end of the hallway if I could help it. The kids refused to sleep in their own room. Carla put crosses over the doors, even though we had not been to church regular in years. The boss at the ranch asked me if everything was all right, because I looked like I had been up all night for a week, which I had. I thought about telling him. I did not. I told him some pipes were rattling in the walls, that was all. On the 4th day, I decided I was done being scared of my own house. That was my mistake. I should have listened to the part of me that wanted to pack everyone into the truck and drive until the ranch was a memory. But where were we going to go? Money was tight. The kids had school. Work was here. This trailer, for better or worse, was ours. I told myself there had to be a rational explanation, and the only way to find it was to open the wall and see what was going on inside. Maybe some animal had gotten stuck in there, and my tired brain had turned its noises into words. Maybe there was some broken duct or pipe that made weird sounds. It was better than thinking about something that knew our names and waited for December. That afternoon, while Carla took the kids to her sister's place in town to get them away from it all for a few hours, I got out my tools. The wind was howling worse than ever, pushing steady against the side of the trailer. The sky was low and gray, spitting a little sleet. Inside, it felt dark even with all the lights on. I stood in the hallway and stared at that stretch of wall where the boot prints had stopped, where my hand had felt heat. I told myself I was just going to cut a small square, just enough to look inside, see insulation, wiring, maybe a dead raccoon, and then I would feel foolish and patch it up, and maybe my mind would quiet down. I did not really believe that, but I wanted to. I picked the spot midway between floor and ceiling, right where my palm had been. I marked out a neat square. The whole time I was doing it, the air felt thick, like the house was holding its breath. The wind outside roared. I put the blade of the drywall saw against the wall and hesitated. That is when it spoke again, right in front of my face. Clear, no muffling at all. "Thank you, Travis." It sounded closer than ever, like its mouth was right where my saw was. I almost dropped the tool. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. For a second, I thought about leaving, about dropping everything and walking out the front door and never coming back. Then I thought about my kids sleeping 10 feet away from this wall every night. I thought about the boot prints, the names, the way the heater and the lights and the radio all bent around that voice. I lifted the saw and started to cut. As soon as the blade pierced the drywall, the wind outside died completely. 1 second it was howling around the trailer, making the whole structure shudder, and the next it was gone, like someone had turned off a fan. The silence pressed on my ears. I kept sawing, the sound of the blade rasping louder than it should have. White dust fell on my boots. The smell of old insulation came through the cut. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the saw with both. I finished the square and popped the piece of drywall loose. It fell inward a little, into the dark space between the studs, then landed on something with a soft sound, not on the floor of the wall cavity where it should have. For a long moment, nothing happened. I crouched down, squinting into the opening. It should have been dark in there, but it was darker than that, like the space was deeper than it had any right to be. The usual yellow insulation did not fill the gap. I could not see any at all. It was just black and empty. The air coming out of the hole felt cold and damp, like the air from a basement that has been closed for years. But underneath the cold, there was this faint warmth, like breath. I leaned closer without meaning to. My own breath fogged the edge of the opening. I could hear something inside, not whispering, not talking. It was a slow, steady sound, like a person sighing. My mind tried to make it into the house settling, or the heater pipes, but the heater was off and the house was still. The voice came from that darkness, quiet and clear. "I have been waiting for you to let me out." I fell back so fast I landed on my backside, the saw skidding across the floor. My heart slammed in my chest. The air in the hallway dropped several degrees. The lights flickered. Somewhere behind me, farther down the hall, a picture frame fell and shattered. The sighing sound in the wall got louder, like the thing inside was moving closer to the opening. I scrambled to my feet, thinking I should cover the hole, nail the drywall back up, do anything to close it, but my legs would not move right. The sound pushed out into the hallway, like the space inside the wall was expanding. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, which was my phone on the little hallway table. I do not remember unlocking it. I do not remember opening the camera. I just know that suddenly I was looking at that black opening through the phone screen, my own reflection faint over it. The audio picked up the sound of my breathing, harsh and fast, and underneath it, that slow, steady exhale from the wall. On the screen, the darkness inside the cavity looked wrong. It did not look like a narrow gap. It looked deep, like I was filming the mouth of a tunnel or a well. For a second, I thought I saw movement in there, a shift of deeper black against black, but I could not say what shape. The voice came again, and this time it was not tired, not stretched out by distance. It sounded pleased. "Come closer, Travis. It is warmer in here." I wanted to run, but my feet held me in place. Something about the way it said warmer made my skin crawl. The house felt like it was tilting around me. The air tasted like dust and something metallic. The phone in my hand felt heavy. I heard another sound then, faint but clear, coming from deep in that dark space. It was the sound of nails scratching wood, slow and steady, like someone testing a surface. Then, underneath that, another sound, quieter but worse. It was my son's voice, Eli, saying, "Dad, let me in, I am cold," but I knew he was 20 miles away in town with his mother and sister. I had told him to text me when they got there. I checked my phone with one shaking thumb. There, above the camera app, was his text from half an hour before. "We are here, Dad. All okay." The voice from the wall kept talking in his exact tone, saying little things like it was practicing. "Let me in. It is cold. Dad." I understood then that it was not just calling our names. It was learning us. It had been listening every December, catching our voices on the wind, pressing against the walls of that trailer, year after year, until it knew exactly how we sounded. It was trying out the voices now, seeing which one would make me move. I stood there shaking, phone pointed at the wall, listening to my own children's voices come out of a place they had never been. Then it used Carla's. "Honey, open the door." It sounded like her on a tired night after work. Then June's, small and scared, saying, "Daddy, please." All of them coming from that black square in the wall that should have been full of insulation and wiring and nothing else. I started to pray without knowing what words I was saying. The lights overhead buzzed and got brighter, then dimmer. The edge of the drywall around the opening began to look soft, like it was bending inward. I staggered back a step. On the phone screen, I saw something then that I wish I had never seen. In the darkness of the wall cavity, two lighter shapes appeared, side by side, about the height where a person's eyes would be if they were standing just on the other side of a thin barrier. They were not glowing. They were just slightly lighter than the rest of the dark, like the way a room looks when someone is standing just behind a curtain at night. They did not blink. They did not move. They were fixed on me. I knew it. I could feel the look, heavy as a hand on my chest. The voice stopped using my family's tones. It went back to that first one, the tired, patient one. "Let me in, Travis. I am so tired of the wind." It sounded like it had been standing there, on the other side of that wall, for a very long time. Maybe since before we moved into that trailer. Maybe since before there was a trailer there at all. Maybe since the first time the wind at Dry Creek Ranch carried more than just dust and cold. I do not know. I do not want to know. I just know that it had figured something out. And that something had to do with December, and with names, and with the way sound travels through thin walls. My phone battery, which had been at 50%, dropped to 10 in 1 second. The screen flickered. The hallway felt like it was 1,000 miles long all of a sudden, like the front door had moved farther away. The thing in the wall, because I have to call it something, and that is all I can manage, started to breathe louder, not like a person out of breath, like someone about to step into a warm room after standing in a blizzard for hours. The drywall around the opening began to bulge, just slightly, like something was testing its give. I did the only thing I could think to do. I ran. I turned and bolted down the hall, shoulder checking the wall, knocking a picture down, almost slipping on the broken frame on the floor. I grabbed my keys from the table without stopping and threw myself out the front door into the cold air. The wind hit me so hard I had to brace against the railing, like it had been waiting for the door to open. Behind me, from inside the house, I heard a new sound. A low, frustrated moan that shook the glass in the windows. It was not human, not animal, not wind. It was all of those and none of them, like the house itself was angry. I got in the truck and drove to town without looking back more than once. Each time I did, I thought I saw the trailer tilt just a little, like something inside was pushing on the walls. When I got to Carla's sister's place, I walked in and hugged my kids so tight they complained. Carla saw my face and did not ask any questions in front of them. Later, in the kitchen, I told her everything, every word, every sound. She believed me. That was somehow worse than if she had not. We did not go back that night. We stayed in her sister's spare room, all four of us, door shut, radio on. I barely slept, every small creak making my heart jump. The next day, the boss called. The neighbor had seen our truck gone and the trailer dark and had gone over to see if everything was all right because he thought he heard someone talking loud on our property. He said when he got close, he changed his mind about knocking. He said the wind out there sounded wrong, and he is not the kind of man who says things like that. We went back in daylight with the boss and the neighbor and Carla's brother. I did not tell them what to listen for. I just said something was wrong with the wall, maybe mold or an animal. When we walked into the trailer, the air felt heavy and damp, like a storm cellar. The wind outside was brisk but normal. Inside, the heater hummed. Everything looked just like we had left it. Dropped blanket on the couch, dishes in the sink, the little hallway table askew from my rush out. The hole in the wall was still there, a neat square. The drywall piece I had cut was on the floor. The men walked up to it, peered inside with flashlights. I hung back halfway down the hall, unable to force my feet closer. The boss said he did not see anything but dark and some old insulation. The neighbor said he thought he saw a mouse, but it was just a shadow. Carla's brother stuck his whole arm in up to the elbow, feeling around. I almost yelled at him to stop, but I swallowed it. He laughed and said nothing here, just cold air. They all looked at me like I had wasted their time, but in a gentle way, like they were worried. The boss put a hand on my shoulder and said maybe we should all take a break, that I had been working too hard. Nobody mentioned hearing anything. Nobody mentioned voices. I walked up and forced myself to look into the opening. In the daylight, it looked like a normal wall cavity. A couple of settled pieces of insulation, a bit of wiring, some dust. It was still colder inside than the room, but not by much. The two pale shapes I had seen through the phone were gone. There was no strange tunnel, no depth that did not make sense. Just the space between two studs. But as I stood there, looking, I felt something brush the inside of my left ear, like a breath, and a voice so low, only I could hear it said, "I am still here, Travis." December comes every year. I jerked back and hit my head on the thermostat. The others looked at me. I said I was fine. We patched the wall. We put extra insulation in. We painted over the new square so it matched the old scuffed white. We tried to make it look like nothing had ever been opened. That night we slept at the ranch again, because what else were we supposed to do? Rent somewhere else with money we did not have. Pull the kids out of school. Leave my job. People do those things when they are running from something you can point at. How do you run from a voice in the wind? Since then, the wind at Dry Creek Ranch has never sounded the same to me. Most days, it is just air moving over land. Most nights, I can almost forget. But every December, when the cold fronts come, when the sky goes that dull gray and the heater kicks on and off, and the mesquites start to sway, it comes back. It does not talk every night. It does not have to. Sometimes it is just a feeling that the wall is listening. Sometimes it is a soft tap, tap, tap inside the drywall, like fingernails waiting. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the trailer is quiet and the kids are breathing steady in the other room, I will hear my name in the wind outside, and a second later, the exact same syllables, in the exact same tone, repeated from the wall by the hallway, delayed like an echo. It has not tried to bargain again, not in words I can make out. It does not need to tell me it is tired of the wind. I know that. I can feel it in the way the air changes when I walk past that spot. We do not talk about it in front of the kids. We tell them the sounds are the heater the old pipes, the squirrels in the eaves. They are not stupid. I see the way Eli looks at the wall sometimes, how he walks a little faster past it. I see the way June sleeps, with the blanket pulled up to her ears, even when it is warm. Carla has started playing music in every room whenever the wind kicks up, like if we fill the house with other sounds, it will not be able to get through. It still does. I am telling you all this because I do not go certain places in my own home anymore. I do not stand in that hallway unless I have to. I do not let my kids sleep with their beds against the walls. I jumped last week when a truck door slammed outside because it sounded too much like the way the wall shook when it spoke. I cannot sit with my back against drywall anywhere, not even in town. I find myself checking for faint boot prints in every hallway I walk down, even at the feed store. I listen to vents, to static on the radio, to the sound of the wind at night, waiting for it to say my name again. And when it does, I freeze like the first time. Every single time. This is not a story I tell for fun. This is not something I bring up to scare people. I do not bring it up at all. Until now, here, on this cracked phone screen at 3 a.m, behind a trailer that still smells like old paint and dust and the faint, wrong chill that gathers every December near that patched up square of wall. I'm not asking you to believe me. I am just trying to put it somewhere outside my head for a minute so I can maybe sleep. If you ever find yourself standing in a place where the wind has a habit of calling things by their names, where the same gust sounds like it is passing by and also circling back, listen close. If it learns your name, that is bad enough. If it starts answering back from inside your walls, you still have time to leave. Once you cut into the place where it has been pressing, once you give it a mouth to speak through, you cannot patch that over, not really. The wall looks smooth now at Dry Creek Ranch, paint even, no cracks. But every December, when the wind picks up and the sky goes gray, if you stand very still in the hallway and lay your hand flat on that spot, you can feel it, just under the surface, breathing slow, waiting for another chance to say, "I have been waiting for you to let me out." My name's Wade Henley. I'm from out past Jacksboro, Texas, near where the FM road turns to gravel and the map just gives up, and I work as a delivery driver for a propane company, the kind that drops tanks at ranches and job sites and all the places people forget about until winter hits and the cold gets in under the doors. I am sitting behind my trailer right now on a busted plastic lawn chair that sinks on one side, and my fingers are shaking so bad I keep hitting the wrong thing on this phone. But I need to get this out, man. I need to say it once, the way it really was, before my head twists it any more than it already has. It was a Thursday when it happened, I remember, because I had the same thing I always have on Thursdays. That microwaved sausage biscuit from the Allsups in town, and a cup of coffee that tastes burned no matter who makes it. And I wore the gray long-sleeve work shirt with the company patch over the pocket. The one with the little rust-colored stain right above the buttons where I spilled something a year back and it never washed out right. I clocked in at 6:12 in the morning because the time clock by the shop door is 5 minutes fast and everyone knows it, but the boss will still write you up if you cut it close. I swiped my card, signed the run sheet, checked the tires on truck 14 because they put the bald ones on that truck for some reason. And I remember thinking the windshield needed a new wiper blade before the next real cold front because it was already streaking. It was early December, the kind of cold we whine about out here, even though folks up north would laugh. And the radio in the shop was talking about another front, dropping the temperature down below freezing that night. And everyone was groaning because propane orders always stack when the temperature drops and nobody gets home on time. I loaded 6 tanks in the back, strapped them down, checked the caps twice because the boss had a fit the week before when someone left one loose. And I wrote the route down in my own little notebook, like I always do, even though it is printed on the dispatch sheet. because writing it by hand helps me remember the order. First run was a ranch out toward Bryson, then a construction site near some new chicken barns, then a couple of trailers scattered off dirt roads that just have numbers instead of names. And I remember thinking it was not a bad day, not on paper, just a long one. I had my lunch in the little blue cooler on the passenger seat. Ham sandwich wrapped in foil, and a bag of those off-brand chips that cut your mouth, and a candy bar I told myself I was not going to eat, but I knew I would around 3. I am telling you all that because I need you to understand it started as nothing. It started as a day I could stack right next to every other day. I have punched in and punched out, and if you looked at the paper part, the logs and the times and the signatures, it would look like everything went the way it always does. It did not. We run County Road 412 on a lot of these trips because it cuts between 2 bigger highways and saves miles. And if you know where to turn off, you can avoid the spots the state troopers like to sit. It is not much of a road, just a 2-lane strip that used to be better before the edges started crumbling, lined with scrub trees and fences, and the kind of small ponds that go dry some summers and then look full again in the spring. There is one little church off it with a sign that never has the letters straight, and an old closed store with boards over the windows, and a gate with a rusted metal deer welded to it that everybody uses as a landmark when they give directions. You drive it enough and it feels almost like a hallway. Same trees, same ditches, same patch spots in the asphalt. I had heard people in the shop talk about that road in winter. You know how it is. You are in the break room trying not to fall asleep. One guy starts telling a story, then another tries to top him. City. The younger guys like to talk about the time they slid into a ditch on black ice, or hit a hog, or saw some weird lights up by the power lines. And then there was this one kid who kept saying there was a girl out there. He never called her anything, just said the girl, always in December, always after dark, standing barefoot right in the middle of County Road 412, and that she never talked, just lifted her hand and pointed toward the tree line. People laughed and asked what he had been drinking. The older drivers just kind of listened and did not say much. I remember one of them, Raul, shaking his head and saying he did not run that road at night anymore, and if dispatch wanted him to, they could hire someone else. I did not think much of it then. People talk. You hear stuff, you forget it. That first year I ran 412 in December, I did not see anything. Just deer, the glow of other trucks, the usual. It was cold, I remember that. The kind of cold where the steering wheel feels like metal even through your gloves, but nothing else. The second year is when I got my first glimpse, and I am saying glimpse because that is all it was, and I tried real hard to keep it in that category in my head. It was about 11:40 at night, because I remember looking at the dash, hating that I was still out, and doing the little math I do about how many hours of sleep I was going to get if I had to be back at 6. Again, I was coming back empty, no tanks in the back, just the rattle of the metal straps and the sound of the road. The sky was clear and the moon was there, but not bright enough to help much, and the radio station out of Wichita Falls was just coming through in that way, where the music sounds a little thin. I came around that long bend right before the church, the one where the road tips just a bit and the right side seems to drop off into nothing, and I saw someone in the lane up ahead. At first, I thought it was a deer, because that is what it usually is, some shape half in your headlights, that your brain sorts into deer or hog or calf. The shape was standing still though. By the time my headlights swept over, I could see it was a person. Small, thin, straight in the middle of the road. My hands went to the wheel. I eased off the gas. My foot moved toward the brake. All that automatic stuff we do before we even think. I blinked, looked again, and there was nothing there. Just the asphalt and that little white line that they painted half-hearted last summer. I told myself right then it was a signpost, or a shadow, or my eyes playing tricks because it had been a long day and I was already halfway home in my head. I did not stop. I did not want to stop. I told myself I would laugh about it in the morning and say something about seeing things. The next day in the shop, that kid started talking about the girl again, and I almost opened my mouth, but I shut it. Because once you say it out loud, it is not a shadow anymore. It is a thing you saw. That winter passed, and the next year came, and I worked the same job because that is what I know how to do. Get in, drive, unload, sign papers, drive back. Bills do not care if you are tired. They do not care if your back hurts. They definitely do not care if you had a weird moment on a county road. The 2nd December, dispatch put 412 on my sheet again, and I thought about asking for a different run, but I did not want to be that guy. It was a Tuesday that time. I had eggs and toast at home because my sister had brought over some groceries, so I did not have to buy another week of junk, and I remember the yolk ran on the plate, and I used the bread to wipe it up. I wore my blue hoodie under the gray work shirt because the wind had that sharp bite in it already, and I put an extra pair of socks in the truck because my boots had a little crack near the toe, and I kept meaning to tape it. I clocked in at 5:58 because I could not sleep much the night before, and I was there early in the dark, standing by the vending machine, listening to it hum. All day was normal. Ranch, job site, more ranch. Dogs barking, people signing. The same questions about how long the tank would last. The last drop was out near some hunting leases, and I remember those guys all had their trucks lined up under the trees, talking loud, wearing all that expensive camouflage gear some people buy. One of them asked if I ever got freaked out driving around out there alone, and I said I had my radio and my heater and I was fine, and he laughed and said sure until you see her. He did not have to say which her. My route back took me along County Road 412 again, and by then it was late. I punched the numbers into my little notebook. I like to write the time when I turn onto a road. Do not ask me why. It is just a habit. It said 10:07 when my tires hit 412. I kept the radio a little louder than usual. I had the heater on that setting where it is too hot on your legs, but your hands are still cold. The road was empty. No other headlights, no taillights, nothing except the little reflective eyes of animals off in the ditches. Miles went by. I was starting to think I had done it to myself, that I had worked myself up over nothing, that I was going to get home and feel dumb about it. Then I came around that same bend before the church, and she was there. I am calling it she, but in that second, my brain did not give it a label. It just went from empty road to not empty, from no one to someone. Small. Too small to be out there by themselves that late. Bare legs, bare feet, a t-shirt hanging down almost to her knees. She was facing away from me, hair hanging straight down, dark against the pale of the shirt. Her arms were at her sides. I saw all that in one heartbeat. I hit the brakes then, harder than I meant to, hard enough that the tank straps behind me rattled and my seatbelt tugged against my chest. The truck slowed. The tires hummed. My headlights washed over her, and she moved. Not the way people move when they jump or flinch. It was too smooth. Her right arm lifted up, slow, like it weighed nothing, until it was out straight at her side, pointing toward the tree line on the right side of the road. She did not turn around. She did not look back to see who was there. She just pointed, and the way it was lined up, it felt like that arm was pointing right through me, through the windshield and into something behind me that I could not see like. My throat closed up. My hands were slick on the wheel. I talked, I know I did, but it came out thin. I said, "Hey, you okay?" Something like that. And the words sounded wrong in the cab, like they were coming from someone else. She did not react at all. I watched the speedometer drop down and I thought, if I stop this truck, I am going to have to get out. And if I get out, that is a real kid in the middle of the road in the cold, and I cannot just drive past. I was thinking about all the things they tell you, that you cannot leave a child out there, that there are cameras everywhere now, that if someone finds out you saw a kid and drove past, they will put your name in the paper and call you a monster. At the same time, every part of me wanted to floor it and go right through the space where she was standing and never look back. I did something in between. I took my foot off the brake, let the truck coast, and edged over into the opposite lane. Watching her the whole time, waiting for her to react, to turn, to flinch. She did not move. She stayed right there in the middle of the lane, like she could not even see me. Her arms stayed out, pointing. I passed her at maybe 15 miles an hour, slow enough that my brain had time to notice details I wish it had not. Her feet were dirty, skin pale, toes spread on the cold asphalt. Her hair was hanging wet, even though it had not rained, like she had just gotten out of a lake or a bath. The skin on her arm did not have that little goosebump texture you get in the cold. It was just smooth, too smooth. I kept waiting to see her breath in the air, but there was nothing. I looked in the side mirror as I pulled past. For a second, I saw her still standing there, arm out, pointing. Then the mirror shook on its bracket because of the road, and when it steadied, there was nothing in the headlights behind me except pavement. I did not stop. I did not call anyone. I got to the end of 412, hit the bigger highway, and I drove home. I told myself I had seen some runaway kid, and she had run off into the trees when I passed, and someone else would call it in. Or maybe she lived right there, and I was overreacting. I told myself a lot of things. That night, I did not sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that arm lifting. I went back to work the next day anyway, because what else was I going to do? I almost said something to Raul when we were loading tanks, but when I opened my mouth, he just looked at me like he already knew what I was about to say, and shook his head once. Not no, like he did not believe me, but no, like he did not want to hear it in words. So I kept it to myself. That should have been it. It should have just been some weird thing that sits in your head and fades, like a strange dream. It did not fade. Every December after that, something came back when the temperature dropped. Sometimes it was small. Static on the radio right in that same section of 412, no matter which station I was on, just a little burst of noise that made the hair on my arms stand up. Sometimes it was the clock on the dash freezing on the same time for longer than it should, then jumping forward. Once I set my travel mug down in the cup holder, and when I looked for it a mile later, it was sitting on the passenger floor, lid off, coffee still hot, like someone had picked it up and put it down again without spilling. Little things you can tell yourself do not mean anything. I kept driving, I kept making runs, I kept my mouth shut. Then last year came, and that is what I'm trying to talk about now, the thing that will not lay flat in my head, no matter how I try to press it down. It was early December again. The morning news said there had been ice up near Oklahoma, and that maybe we would get some flurries that night, which everyone made jokes about because snow is a big deal here, even when it is barely anything. I woke up to the sound of the little heater in my trailer clicking on and off, and I could see my breath when I sat up. I had cereal because I was too tired to cook anything. I put on 2 pairs of socks, thermal shirt, the same gray work shirt with the stain, my old brown jacket that smells like propane and sweat no matter how much you air it out. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my ex from the night before and a text about money, and I felt that dull weight in my chest that never really goes away. I punched in that morning at 6:03. The time clock made that same little beep. Dispatch had me on a long run that day, out past Grayford, then looping back in a way that put me on 412 after dark. I saw it on the paper and my stomach tightened. I almost said something, almost asked if someone else could take that part, but the words stuck. I signed the sheet. I loaded the tanks. I told myself whatever was on that road was in my head. Or if it was not, it had been fine before, right? I had driven past and nothing had actually happened. I did my stops. People asked the same questions. When will it get cold? How long will it last? Do you think prices are going up? I smiled. I joked. I wrote down meter readings. The sun slid across the sky the way it always does, and shadows got longer, and that little knot in my stomach got tighter. By the time I finished the last drop near the leases, the light was just about gone. The hunters were not there this time. The place was quiet, the air so still it felt heavy. I got back in truck 14 and just sat for a second with my hands on the wheel, breathing. I knew where I was going. There are other ways back to town, but they add miles and they add time, and dispatch watches those things. They check the GPS, they count the fuel. I started the engine, the dash lit up. The little digital clock said 9:31. I remember that exact time because I wrote it down without even thinking. My pen scratching it in my notebook next to 412. I pulled out, turned, and the sign for County Road 412 slid past the windshield. The first few miles were nothing. Trees, fences, a dead armadillo on the shoulder. My hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles pale. The heater was blowing on my feet, but they felt cold anyway. The radio was on low. Some country song about somebody missing somebody. I watched the white line and the reflectors. I kept looking for headlights that were not there. I knew exactly which bend it was, the one before the church, and when the shape of it started to rise up ahead of me in the darkness. The way the road tilted, my heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself if she was there, I would stop this time. I would get out. I would do the thing I should have done before. If she was a real girl, she needed help. If she was not, then I needed to know that too, even if I did not want to. The bend came. The church sign was just beyond, barely visible. My headlights swept forward, catching the pale stripe of the shoulder, the dark of the trees. For a second, there was nothing. I started to breathe again, just a little. Then she was there, right in the middle of the lane, closer than she had been the year before, like I had not come upon her, but she had just appeared at the edge of the light. Same bare feet, planted solid on the road, same long t-shirt hanging straight. Her hair was darker now, or maybe the light was different, but it clung to her neck and back in strands that looked stiff. Her skin did not look right. It was not just pale, it had that flat tone you see on the belly of a fish. I hit the brakes. This time I came to a full stop, the truck shuddering a little with the effort. The hazard lights clicked on because I smacked the button without thinking. The red on the dash blinked back and forth, back and forth. I sat there for maybe 3 seconds, just breathing, watching her in the headlights. She did not turn. She did exactly what she had done before. Her right arm lifted up, slow and smooth, until it was straight, pointing toward the woods on the right. There was no hesitation in the movement, no tremor. It was like watching a hand on a clock sweep from one number to another. I put the truck in park. My fingers did not feel like they belonged to me. I told myself to get out. I told myself if I drove away again, I would never sleep right again. I grabbed the flashlight I keep in the door pocket, the big heavy one with tape on the handle. My boots hit the asphalt and the cold came up through the soles fast, biting into my toes. The air had that sharp smell it gets right before ice, when the moisture hangs there but has not quite turned. I walked around the front of the truck, staying in the beams as long as I could because the dark outside them felt thick. She was maybe 10 feet ahead of me when I stopped. From that close, I could see more. Her hair was not just wet. There were little bits of leaf stuck in it, and something that looked like dried grass. Her t-shirt had a faint design on it, faded, something like a cartoon sun, but the colors were almost all gone. Her arms were thin, but not in a way that made me think of being sick, just like she had grown too fast and the rest of her had not caught up. Her feet were filthy. But the dirt was the wrong kind for that road. Darker, clumped in a way that made me think of creek banks. Her skin did not show any color from the cold. No red on the knees or elbows. Just that flat, almost gray. I said, "Hey, you okay?" Louder this time. My voice came out rough. She did not move. Her arms stayed pointed toward the trees. I took a step closer. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear the engine idling behind me, the little ticking sound it makes. I could not hear her breathing. I could not hear anything from her at all. No shift of weight, no rustle of fabric, nothing. I stepped to the side a little, trying to see her face. That was the part I was most scared of. I do not know why. Maybe because once you see a face, it feels more real. She did not turn, but her head was angled just enough that I could see part of her cheek. It was smooth, no marks, but there was something wrong with the way the light hit it. It did not seem to change when the hazard lights flashed on and off. Everything around her did. The red glow moving over the trees, the front of the truck, the surface of the road, but her skin stayed the same. That is what made me step back a little. That, and the fact that the smell of the air around her was colder than the air by the truck. Not different, not like rot or anything, just colder, like standing in front of an open freezer. I am not trying to make this sound fancy. I am telling you how it felt. I said, "Do you live out here? Do you need help? I have a phone. I can call someone." Nothing. Her arm stayed out. Her finger was aimed at the darkest part of the tree line, a little gap in the brush where you could see what looked like a path people had used. I could not see anything in there, just black shapes. I stood there for another second, fighting with myself. Then something in my head clicked over. Maybe it was the thought of some other body back there needing help. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else. I do not know. All I know is the next thing I was doing was walking toward the trees. I told myself I would go just far enough to see if anyone was there. That was the deal I made with myself. Just far enough to say I had looked. The ground off the road was hard. The dirt frozen in little ridges that tried to twist your ankles. My flashlight beam cut through the dark in a straight line, but it felt like it did not go as far as it usually does. The trees seemed to lean in, not actually moving, but crowded closer. I could hear the crunch of my boots. I could not hear any animals, not even the little rustle of things in the grass. It was too quiet. I walked into the trees, counting my steps because it felt like if I did not count them, I would not find my way back. 10 steps, 15, 20. At around 30, I saw the clearing. It was not big, just a space where the ground leveled out and some brush had been pushed aside. There was a black circle on the ground where a fire had been, the old kind, with half-burned logs and a ring of rocks. 2 folding chairs sat near it, one upright, one on its side like someone had knocked it over and never bothered to pick it up. There was a cooler with a lid half open and a stack of cans near it, some of them crushed. Off to the right, there was a tent, one of those cheap dome ones from the big box stores, the kind you see 100 of every deer season. The top of it was sagging inward, the poles bent. A dusting of what I thought at first was frost covered the top, but when the light hit it, it looked more like a thin coat of powdery dirt, the kind that blows in when no one has been around. The flap of the tent was half unzipped. The zipper teeth glinted in my flashlight beam. There was a sleeping bag just visible inside and a shape in it. Small, about the size of the girl on the road. My stomach turned over. I did not want to go closer. I did not want to see whatever was in there. At the same time, I knew if I turned around right then and walked away, that tent would follow me back in my head every night for the rest of my life, and I would never know if someone had needed me and I had walked out on them. My hand shook as I reached for the flap. I remember the feel of the fabric under my fingers, stiff with cold. I pulled it back and pointed the light inside. She was lying on her side, facing away from me, the sleeping bag pulled up to her shoulders. Her hair was the same dark tangle as the girl on the road, spread across the cheap pillow. Her arm was outside the bag, hand relaxed, fingers curled just a little. There was frost on the inside of the tent window, a thin film that had grown in delicate lines. The air inside was colder than the air outside, if that makes any sense. I could see the back of her neck, skin bare above the bag. It did not rise and fall. It did not move at all. I did not have to touch her to know she was not getting up. There is a kind of stillness living people do not have. Even when someone is sleeping, there are little shifts, little twitches. There was none of that. I whispered something I do not even remember. Maybe a prayer, maybe just her, hey, wake up. Nothing changed. My brain kept trying to come up with reasons. Maybe she was just that still. Maybe she was in some deep sleep. Maybe I was overreacting. The light shook in my hand and jumped around the tent, catching more details. An empty chip bag. A little plastic flashlight with dead batteries. A boot near the door, a small one, tipped over. Everything had that thin layer of frost or dust on it, like it had been there longer than one night. I reached for my phone. My fingers fumbled the buttons. I dialed 911. The screen lit up my face in a pale glow. It rang. 1 ring, 2. Then the sound crackled. I thought it was dropping the call. I pulled the phone back to look. The screen showed the timer ticking like it had been answered. I put it back to my ear. The sound that came through was not a voice. It was a mix of static and something underneath it, like a crowd far away or wind in tall grass. I said hello, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing answered. The timer kept ticking. Then it stopped by itself, the screen going back to the home screen. The call log said it had been connected for 27 seconds. I tried again. The second time, it did not ring at all. The screen said calling, but all I heard in my ear was my own breathing. Then it beeped, and the words call failed popped up. I looked at the signal bars. They were there. Not strong, but enough. I tried calling the shop instead. It went straight to voicemail. I looked at the time at the top of the screen. It said 10:09. I had written down 9:31 when I turned on to 412. And I knew it had not taken me 40 minutes to drive a few miles and walk 30 steps into the trees. It felt like maybe 10, 15 minutes. I told myself maybe I misread it. Maybe I wrote it down wrong. My eyes did not feel right. The light from the phone hurt. I put it away and stepped back from the tent. That is when I felt it. Not a hand, not a touch, but a weight of attention. You know that feeling when someone is standing behind you, even if they do not make a sound. The back of your neck goes tight. Your shoulders want to hunch. That hit me all at once. I turned around so fast I nearly dropped the flashlight. I expected to see her, the girl from the road, standing in the clearing. For a second, I saw nothing. Just the chairs, the cooler, the darkness between the trees. Then my beam found her. She was standing at the very edge of the circle of light, right where the path from the road met the clearing. Just inside the trees. She was facing me this time. I could see more of her face, but not all. The light hit her eyes in a way I did not understand. They did not shine, did not glow. They did not even seem to catch the light. They just sat there, dark, flat, no white showing. Her arm was down at her side again. As I watched, it lifted, slow, smooth. She pointed not at me, but past me, to a spot behind the tent, deeper into the woods. Her finger tracked something that was not there in my beam. My throat closed so tight I could hardly breathe. I said, "Who are you?" trying not to let my voice shake. And it came out thin and high anyway. She did not reply. The only sound was the little crackle of frost under my boots as I shifted my weight. My mind started to break things down the way you do when you panic. Option 1, I follow where she is pointing. Option 2, I leave. Option 1 meant going deeper into that black space behind the tent. Option 2 meant turning my back on the tent, on her, on everything. and trying to find my way back to the road with the certainty that something was watching me go. I do not know how long I stood there, my thoughts flipping back and forth. My legs chose for me. They turned and ran. I do not remember deciding. I just remember the sudden motion, my feet pounding against the frozen ground, branches grabbing at my jacket. The flashlight beam jumped all over, hitting tree trunks, bits of old fence. Nothing that told me where I was going. I tried to count my steps again, but the numbers jumbled. 20, 30, 10. I lost track. The ground seemed to stretch. The trees did not feel like they were in the same places. It is hard to explain without sounding crazy. I kept expecting to see the glow of my headlights through the branches, but there was nothing. Just more dark, more trunks. I stopped, chest heaving, and turned around, trying to get my bearings. Every direction looked the same. For a second, I thought I had turned myself around, that the road was behind me, that I had just gotten spun in the panic, and I told myself to calm down, to listen. I shut off the flashlight. Everything went black. No glow from the truck, no hint of light from the road, nothing. The dark pressed in. I could hear my heart, the blood in my ears. Under that, something else. Not footsteps, not breathing. A faint, steady sound like fingers brushing through dead grass. I turned the light back on. The beam caught a shape right in front of me. Not the girl, the tent. I had run in a circle. I was on the other side of the clearing now, looking at the back of the sagging dome. The flap I had opened was away from me. The path behind it, the one she had pointed to from the edge, was a black slash between the trees. My legs went weak. The air felt thinner. I did not want to be there anymore. I did not care what was deeper in. I wanted the road. I wanted the truck. I wanted the world where clocks made sense and roads went where they were supposed to. I backed away from the tent, keeping my eyes on that black path as long as I could, then turned and ran again. This time forcing myself to pick a straight line in my head and stick to it. I aimed for where I thought the road should be and just went, branches slapping my face, my breath tearing at my throat. After what felt like too long and not long enough, my boots hit the edge of asphalt. The sudden smoothness under my feet almost made me stumble. The headlights were there, the truck sitting at an angle with the hazards still blinking. The girl was standing directly behind it, in the middle of the lane, facing the back of the truck, arm down at her side. She had not been between me and the clearing when I ran. There was no way she could have gotten past me without me seeing, not unless I blacked out for a second. I stopped at the edge of the light, chest heaving, and she turned her head slowly toward me. That was the first time I saw her face, straight on. It was not messed up. There was no blood, no big wound, none of the things you are expecting when you brace yourself. It was just wrong in small ways. Her eyes were too dark, no shine. Her lips were a little too pale, like she had been out in the cold too long. There was no color in her cheeks. Her skin did not react to the hazard lights at all. The red wash kept moving over the road, the bumper, my boots, but hers stayed that same flat tone. Her mouth opened just a little. Not enough to speak, just enough that for a second I thought she was going to take a breath, and the sound of it was going to be the worst thing I had ever heard. Nothing came out. Her arm lifted again. She pointed at the woods behind me, not the path I had come from, but a different direction, like there was something else I still was not seeing. That was it for me. Whatever courage I had left snapped. I backed toward the truck, never taking my eyes off her. My hand found the door handle, then the seat, then the wheel. I got in, slammed the door, locked it without thinking, like a lock means anything against whatever she is. My fingers fumbled for the gear. I put it in drive, pressed the gas. The truck eased forward. For a second, she stayed in the same spot in the mirror, not getting smaller, like the road under her was moving with me. Then the mirror shook, and she was gone. I did not look back again. I stared at the road ahead and drove. My hands were shaking so bad, the wheel kept twitching. The radio was still on low. The song had changed, but I could not hear the words. All I could hear was the click of the hazard button as I punched it off, the hum of the tires, my own breathing. When I hit the highway, the world looked normal again. Cars, lights, distance signs. I do not remember the rest of the drive back to the yard. I must have made it because I pulled in and parked and killed the engine and went inside. The clock over the break room door said 4:23. That made no sense. The run I had was long, but not that long. The distance from the last drop to 412 to the yard does not add up to almost 7 hours, not even with the time in the woods. I checked my logs later. The times I wrote down looked normal up until 9:31 at the turn onto 412. There was a blank space where I should have written the time I hit the highway on the other side. Then it said 4:20 at the yard. The fuel usage did not match either. It was higher than it should have been, like I had driven extra miles. I went home in a fog. I do not remember the drive to the trailer. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my boots for a long time. When I finally lay down, I did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her arm lifting up, pointing. The next day, I called in sick for the first time in years. My boss was not happy, but he let it slide. The day after that, I went in because I have to keep the job. I walked into his office and told him I needed to show him something on the truck. I do not know what I thought it would prove. I guess I thought if the dash cam had caught her, if the video showed her standing there, then it was not just in my head. Truck 14 has a camera mounted in the front. One of those little boxes the company put in to watch for accidents and keep an eye on us. It records constantly when the truck is on, and it stores the footage on some card they swap out every so often. I told him I thought someone had been on the road, that it might show up, that it could be important. He gave me this look like he thought I was overreacting, but he came out with me. We sat in the cab while he fiddled with the little screen and pulled up the timestamp. I watched my own headlights appear on the screen, sweeping over the road, the bend before the church. The time in the corner said 9:42. The video looked normal at first. Just the road, the reflectors, the darkness beyond. Then the image hiccuped. Not a full jump, just a little jitter, like someone had bumped the camera. The sound cut out for a second, then came back. My boss muttered something under his breath about cheap equipment. The truck slowed on the video the way it had in real life. The angle did not show the inside of the cab, just the road ahead. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then at the far edge of the headlights, centered in the lane, something pale appeared. The pixels fuzzed around it, like the camera did not want to focus. My boss leaned forward, squinting. The shape held still while we rolled closer. You could tell it was a person, small, standing. The truck slowed more. On the tape, the hazards came on, the little click audible through the mic. The shape flickered, then sharpened, then flickered again. As the truck got close enough that the headlights should have lit her up clearly, the whole image smeared. Not black, not static, just a blur of light and dark that lasted maybe 2 seconds. When it cleared, the road was empty. The truck eased to a stop on the shoulder. My boss rewound and played that part 3 times. Each time, same thing. Shape, blur, empty road. He turned and looked at me then, eyebrows up. I did not know what to say. I knew what I had seen. The tape was almost worse than if it had shown nothing at all. He kept going anyway, fast forwarding through the part where I must have been in the woods. The camera just showed empty road, the hood of the truck, the blinking hazards. There was no sign of me walking away, which made sense, since it was pointed forward. The timestamp in the corner ticked along. At one point, it jumped, skipping from 9:49 to 10:32 in an instant. My boss frowned and tapped the screen like that would change it. When the timestamp hit 10:33, something changed in the audio. The hum of the engine and the faint hiss of the heater suddenly got quieter, like someone had laid a hand over the mic. Underneath, a new sound came in, faint at first. It was not clear enough to call a voice. More like a pattern in the noise, a rise and fall that felt like words you could not quite make out. My boss said it was the radio, but the display on the dash was dark. I had turned it off before I stopped. We both watched as the truck sat there in the road, hazards blinking, nothing moving. Then, in the far distance of the frame, something appeared in the middle of the road, a tiny dark line at first, hardly more than a shadow. Frame by frame, it moved closer. You know how it looks when a person walks toward you from far away. They get bigger, their outline sharpens. That is what it did, but wrong. The speed was not consistent. Sometimes it jumped a little too far between frames. Sometimes it did not seem to move at all. The closer it got, the more the pixels around it crawled, like the camera was fighting it. I knew what it was before it was clear. Even that small, I knew. My boss reached for the pause button, but his finger hovered. I think he wanted to see. I know I did, even though every part of me was braced against what was coming. The figure kept coming closer until it was just at the edge of the beams. You could make out bare legs, a t-shirt. The face was still just a blur. Then, in one frame, it was closer than it should have been, right at the very bottom of the shot. Too close to the hood for there to be room without the truck having backed up. The pixels went wild, crawling. For one single frame, the face sharpened. Not much, not like a clear photograph, but enough to see eyes, dark and flat, and a mouth open just a little. My boss flinched and finally hit pause. The next time he hit play, the screen went to static. Not full black, not the company logo. Just static, the kind you used to see on old TVs when the channels ended. It lasted 4 seconds, I counted. Then the image came back. The truck was moving. The hazards were off. The timestamp said 4:17. My boss sat back and rubbed his face. He said the system must have glitched, that the timestamp was wrong, that the sensor on the camera had a fault. He said a lot of things to fill the air. I did not say anything. I did not tell him that those 4 seconds of static lined up with the blank spot in my own memory. The part where I do not remember putting the truck back in drive, do not remember deciding to leave. I asked him if he could save the footage. He said he would, that he would give it to the tech guy the company uses, that maybe they could fix the corrupted parts. Weeks went by. Every time I asked him about it, he said they were still looking at it, that there had been some issue with the files. One day, he told me the card had gotten overwritten by mistake. New footage recorded over it. Nothing they could do. His eyes slid away when he said it. I stopped asking. I changed my routes when I could. I traded shifts. I told dispatch my truck was acting funny on 412, or that the fuel numbers were off. Anything I could think of. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not. The nights I could not avoid it. I would feel my chest tighten as soon as I saw the sign for that road. There were times I drove it and nothing happened. No girl, no static, no time jump, just the road and the dark. Those nights almost bothered me more. You start to think maybe it was all in your head, but then you remember the way the pixels crawled on that screen, the way the temperature dropped near her, the way your phone refused to give you a real voice on the other end. It has been almost a year now, December again. The air has that same bite. I do not take 412 anymore if I can help it. I have driven extra miles and eaten the cost in fuel rather than turn down that road. When I hear someone at work bring it up, I find a reason to walk away. Raul quit 2 months after that night. He said he was tired of the hours, that his knees were shot. But when he handed in his keys, he shook my hand a little too long and said, "Watch the back roads when it gets cold." There are little ways it sticks to you, you know. I cannot look at kids standing barefoot without something tightening in my chest, even if they are just at a pool or on the grass. When the radio on my kitchen counter slips into static for a second before finding a station. I freeze and stare at it until the sound settles. I woke up once last week to a sound outside the trailer, the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel, slow and even. I told myself it was the neighbor coming home late, but when I looked out the window, I did not see anyone on the path, just my own boot prints from earlier, dark against the lighter rock. There were a couple of smaller prints next to them, bare, toes spread. I wanted to tell myself they had been there all day, and I just had not noticed. The next morning, they were gone. Rain can do that, or wind, or just the way the ground shifts. I know that. Still, I unplugged my dash cam last week. I told my boss it was acting up. He said they would schedule a replacement. I did not tell him that 2 nights before, I had parked outside a store to grab a drink, and when I came back and scrolled through the footage out of habit, there was a moment where the camera showed the empty seat beside me. And then, in the next frame, the fabric on that seat was pressed down just a little, like someone small had sat there, and stayed that way for 3 more frames before popping back up. When I looked up, the passenger door was closed like it had always been, and the lot outside was empty. You asked why I do not work night shifts anymore. This is why. I swap with whoever I can. I take the early runs, the hot days, the long lists, anything to be home before the dark settles in, especially in December. I still have to drive sometimes after sunset. Life does not bend all the way around your fears, but I do not go near 412. If I have to pass that turnoff, I keep my eyes on the center of my lane and my hands tight on the wheel, and I do not look at the shoulders. Because I know how it goes. First you see her standing there, barefoot in the cold, and you tell yourself it is just a kid, just a shadow, just a trick of the headlights. Then she lifts her arm and points, and if you follow, you find that little campsite sunk under a layer of frost that should not be there, and a tent with the air inside so cold, it hurts your teeth. You find one girl who will not get up, and another one who keeps showing you places you do not want to see. The last thing I will tell you is this. 2 weeks ago, one of the newer guys at the yard, a kid barely old enough to drink, was complaining about a run they gave him. Said he did not like 412, that it gave him a bad feeling. I felt that old chill crawl up my spine. I asked him why. He said he had seen something out there the night before. I asked him what. He said there was a girl standing in the middle of the road in a t-shirt, no shoes, right before the church. He laughed when he said it, but his eyes did not match the laugh. He said she did not say anything, just kind of stared and lifted her hand like she wanted him to look out into the trees. I asked him if he stopped. He said no, he did not have time for that. He had tanks to deliver. He said the dash cam would have caught her anyway if it was anything real. I told him to check the footage to see what it showed. He shrugged and said he had already tried, but the file for that stretch of road was messed up, just static and blank timestamps. Then he walked off, whistling some song under his breath, like it was no big deal. I watched him go and felt that cold nest deeper in my chest. This thing, whatever it is out there on County Road 412, it does not live in stories. It lives in the little gaps. In the minutes that do not add up on your log sheet. In the frames the camera cannot quite decide how to show. In the spot of cold air that follows you from the road to your bed. I am telling you this not because I think saying it will fix anything, but because every December, when the temperature drops and the heater in my trailer clicks on in the middle of the night, I lie awake and listen for the sound of bare feet on gravel. I will not drive that road again. I do not care what dispatch says. I do not care if I have to quit and find some other way to pay my bills. There is a girl out there who never speaks and always points. And there is another one lying in a tent that feels like it has been there longer than the dates on any calendar. The cameras can glitch all they want. The clocks can jump. I know what I saw. I swear to God, man, I know what I saw. My name's Wyatt Connor. I'm from out past Santa Ana in Coleman County. and I work as a ranch hand, mostly fence and feed and whatever else. The boss points at that day and says, "Do that." I'm sitting behind my trailer right now on the cinder block step where the metal sags in the middle, talking into my phone. And if my neighbors hear any of this, I know for a fact I'll have to pack up and find somewhere else to live because nobody wants this on their street. It was a December day, that last time. I remember it because the air had that wet cold in it that gets into your fingers and stays, even when you shove your hands in your pockets and blow on them. I got up around 5:15 that morning. I remember the numbers because my alarm never went off. I just opened my eyes and the clock said 5:15, and I felt like something was already wrong and I hadn't even sat up yet. I made coffee in the little stained Mr. Coffee machine on the counter, the one that drips on the hot plate and smells burnt even when it's fresh. I ate 2 pieces of toast, white bread, barely any butter because I was low and kept forgetting to buy more. I pulled on the same jeans I'd worn the day before, still had a little strip of dried mud across the right knee, and I put on my green work shirt with Connor stitched over the pocket in white thread, even though I wasn't on any official crew that needed names. My aunt gave me that shirt after her husband passed, and it just became the one I wore on cold days. I threw on my brown jacket, the one with the busted zipper pull, and my cap with the faded feed store logo. I left the trailer at 5:42. I remember that because I checked the time and thought, good, I'm not running behind for once. I got in my truck, my old white F-150, with the heater that only really kicks in after you've already shivered for 10 minutes. And I sat there with the engine idling, watching my own breath for a second and thinking about how I should have filled up the night before. There was a smear on the inside of the windshield from where I'd wiped it with my sleeve the day before. I can still see that smear when I close my eyes. It was just a work day. Feed the cattle, check the tanks, look at a stretch of fence line the boss was worried about. That was all. That's how it started. Devil's Fork Road isn't on any sign. Folks call it that because of a story some old-timer made up about a horse falling and breaking its legs on the gravel and refusing to die. The real name on the county map is just a number, one of those county roads that never made sense to me. It's the cut-through I take from my place to the ranch because it saves me about 12 minutes instead of going around near town. Long stretch of caliche and dirt, barely 2 lanes, trees closing in on both sides in some spots, open pasture in others. No lights, no reflectors, just you and what your headlights catch. First time I saw the blue lights was 3 years before all this. Also December. Also early. I was coming back from a late feed run then, not going out, and I figured it was some guy parked off in the brush with those cheap aftermarket LEDs folks put on their bumpers now. They were way off the road, kind of up a little rise. Just 2 of them, faint, steady, soft blue. I remember thinking it looked strange because they didn't seem to have beams, just orbs hanging there. I drove past, told myself I was being dumb. You see things in the dark, everyone does. Next year, around the same time, different night, same road, I see them again. Still, off in the distance, still that dull blue, but a little closer to the road than I remembered. I even joked with one of the other hands, man, someone out on Devil's Fork has those weird lights again. And he just shrugged and said, maybe it's some guy running deer illegal, don't worry about it. The 3rd year is the one I'm talking about now, the one that won't leave me alone. I hadn't thought about those lights for months. You don't keep that stuff in your head when you've got bills and sore knees and a truck you aren't sure will pass inspection again. I was just driving out, sipping bad coffee from the chipped travel mug, listening to the radio fuzz in and out of some station out of Abilene that only comes in clear when you don't care what they're playing. It was still dark, no hint of sunrise, just that flat black Texas winter sky with no clouds and too many stars. The kind of cold that makes the steering wheel feel harder under your hands. I know exactly where the first wrong thing happened. There's a big mesquite on the right side of Devil's Fork that got hit by lightning a while back. Half of it is dead, and half of it still has these twisted branches that lean out over the ditch. I always clock that tree, every time, because it means I'm about halfway. I passed that tree. I remember the shape of it in my headlights. Then I drove maybe 2 minutes more, not even, and I saw blue light reflecting on my windshield. At first, I thought it was a reflection from my radio light or something on the dash, but nothing in my truck is that color. I turned the radio down without really knowing I was doing it and looked ahead, and there was that same soft blue glow off to the right. Only this time, it wasn't up on a rise or way off. It was just at the edge of my high beams, maybe 30, 40 yards out into a pasture. 2 circles, solid. Not blinking, too steady to be some old truck with dying bulbs. I remember saying out loud, "Man, not this again." And then I realized I had been holding my breath since I saw the reflection. I told myself, keep driving. People leave equipment out. People put weird lights on everything now. It's nothing. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted burnt and cold. I kept my eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. And I said, I swear to God, I'm not slowing down. I'm not pulling over. I'm not that guy in the stories. Only the road under my tires stopped feeling right. The sound changed. You know how on a dirt road you can hear the crunch, the little tiny knocks of rock under the tires? That went away. It went smooth and quiet, like I had pulled onto pavement, but I know that stretch is all caliche. I checked my speed. I was doing 38, same as always on that part. Nothing crazy. And then the blue lights were closer. I didn't see them move. They were just closer, like the space between me and them had folded up. They were still off to the right, but instead of near a fence line, they were almost at the edge of the ditch. My headlights hit the barbed wire and the posts, and I could see they were behind it. Not in the road, but they looked level with me now, not far away. 2 circles, no beams, just that soft blue, no flicker, no halo. My heart started going hard in my chest, and my throat felt tight. I told myself they were some kind of marker. Maybe the rancher out there got tired of people hitting his fence. Maybe he put lights on the posts. That made sense. It really did. Until one of them moved, not blinked, not swung because of wind. It slid, slow and smooth, sideways and then up, as if it was on a rail running through the air. I know what a light hanging from a wire looks like in the wind. This was not that. This was deliberate. I heard myself say no, out loud. Just that one word. My mouth was dry. My hands started to sweat on the wheel. I looked straight ahead and I told myself if I didn't look at it, then it couldn't do anything. That was when the blue light swept across the front of my truck. It didn't brighten. It didn't flare. It just moved, and every piece of chrome in the hood, and even the edge of my side mirror, picked up that color and threw it back. I saw it on my own skin, on my knuckles. My headlights didn't change. The road didn't brighten. It was like 2 different worlds of light were touching each other, but not mixing. Then it was gone from the windshield. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up under my jacket. I checked the rearview mirror. That was the worst mistake I made that night. In the mirror, I should have seen just road and darkness and my own taillights. Instead, way off behind me, there were more than 2 of those circles. I couldn't count them. My brain tried, but they were just a cluster, a pattern that almost made sense, but not quite. All soft blue, all the same size, all at the same height, floating above the road like a ceiling of eyes. They stayed the same distance away, even as I drove. That broke something in me. Distance is supposed to change. Things are supposed to get smaller, not stay fixed. I snapped my eyes back to the windshield because I felt dizzy, like if I stared at them any longer, I'd start seeing that pattern in everything. I pressed the gas. The truck jumped a little. The speedometer climbed. 45, 50. The road wasn't made for that in the dark, but I didn't care. My stomach was tight and my teeth hurt from clenching them. Then my headlights lit up a curve I didn't recognize. Devil's Fork has turns, sure, but I know them. I know where to tap the brakes, where the trees move back, where the fence line switches sides. This was different. The trees were wrong, too close. The branches leaned over the road, making almost a tunnel. I eased off the gas and said, No, it doesn't do this here. I checked the clock. It said 6:07. That didn't line up with where I knew I should be. I had lost time somehow. That was when the blue light came back. Not from the side this time, but out in front. It appeared at the far edge of my high beams, dead center, hanging over the road like some kind of floating signal. Just one at first, then another next to it, then another row above those, and another. Each one clicked on, not with a sound but with a feeling, like pressure in my ears. They stacked until there was a sheet of them, all the same size, all the same blue, filling the space above the road like a wall. I hit the brakes without thinking. My coffee mug slid off the seat and hit the floorboard. The truck fishtailed a little on the dirt, but again, I couldn't hear the gravel. It was just this dead rolling sound, like tires on polished floor. I stopped. My seatbelt dug into my chest. The headlights washed over the road and the ditch and the start of the fence line. The blue lights hung there, just beyond where my beams faded. I couldn't see what they were attached to. I couldn't see any shape. Only when I stared too hard, I started to get a headache, and I could almost make out an outline blocking some of the stars behind them, something too tall and too wide standing there. But my eyes kept sliding away from it, like they refused to focus. I told myself to back up, turn around, go back the long way, call in and say I had a flat or something. My hands went to the shifter. I started to put it in reverse. That was when my truck moved, and I didn't. The engine stayed at a low idle. My foot was on the brake. My hand was on the shifter. I did not press the gas. But the truck rolled forward, just a little, like something had hooked the front and was gently pulling. I pumped the brake. The pedal pushed back like normal, and the nose dipped a bit, and then the pull kept going. I swear to God, I know the difference between coasting and being towed. The blue lights stayed the same size, the same distance. I blinked and my eyes burned. The air in the cab felt thick, like the heater was on full blast, but I knew it was still just barely working. I reached over and shut the headlights off, because some dumb corner of my brain thought, if it can't see me, it can't get to me. The cab fell into dark. The only light now was that blue out ahead, shining through the windshield and painting everything this sick, washed-out color. The radio cut out, dead, no static, just sudden silence. That's what scared me more than anything so far. There's always some noise out there, a distant truck, wind, a dog, anything. This was nothing. I could hear my own breathing and the tiny tick of the engine, and that was it. I grabbed the keys. I was going to turn the truck off completely. The second my fingers touched the metal, something tapped the back window. Just once. A sharp, hollow tap right behind my head. Not on the tailgate, not on the bed, on the glass of the cab. I froze. You ever have your body decide for you that you're not moving? That was it. My shoulders locked, my neck locked, my hand clamped around the keys so hard they dug into my palm. The tap didn't repeat. Instead, I heard something drag along the side of the truck, slow, starting at the back and moving forward. A scrape without sound, if that makes sense. I didn't hear it in my ears. I felt it in my teeth and in the bones around my eyes. It stopped right beside my door. The blue light coming in shifted, like whatever was out front had leaned or turned. The pattern of circles changed. I could see now that some were closer to the hood than others, and a couple were angled down, and they weren't quite perfect circles. They had darker centers. My brain said eyes, and after that, I couldn't think of them as anything else. Rows and rows of eyes, all locked on the front of my truck, all at the same height, way higher than any person could reach. I don't know how long we sat there. Me in the cab, that thing in the road, another bit of it right next to my door where I couldn't see. The clock on the dash still said 6:07. It didn't change. I stared at it for I don't know how long. The second hand didn't move. It was stuck, ticking faintly in my ears, but not going anywhere. I started talking then. Not on purpose. It just came out. I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to come this way. I won't come this way anymore. I get it. You can have the road." My voice sounded small in the cab. It didn't echo or anything. It just dropped like the air swallowed it. There was another tap on the glass. Boom. This time on the passenger side, toward the bottom, then another higher, up by the corner. I had this picture in my head of something feeling along the truck. Not rough, not banging, just checking, measuring. I thought about unlocking the door and running. I knew I wouldn't make it 10 feet before something touched me. That thought sat heavy in my chest. I kept my hands where they were, one on the wheel, one on the keys. The pull on the truck stopped. We were just there, not moving. The blue eyes in front seemed to narrow, or maybe the light dimmed a little. I could make out more of the shape now. It wasn't a neat outline. It shimmered at the edges, like heat over asphalt, only it was freezing. I could see my breath now, even in the blue light, puffing out in front of me and hanging longer than it should. Then, just as sudden, something changed. Not in the thing, in me. I got this feeling, low and sure, that if I looked away from those eyes and looked out the side window instead, I would see a face pressed to the glass. Not a human one, just some kind of surface, flat and wrong and too big. Right there, inches from my own. I knew if I saw it, that would be it. I wouldn't be telling this now. So I stared straight ahead until my eyes watered, and I said, "Listen, I'm going to put the truck in reverse. I'm going to go home, and you can stay here. This is yours now." It sounds stupid, talking to something that never said anything back, but I couldn't stop. Then the clock on the dash jumped. It went from 6:07 to 6:23. Just like that. No in between. The radio crackled back on, mid-song. The heater fan finally kicked up. The sound of gravel under my tires came rushing back, even though I hadn't moved. The blue lights flickered, just once, all together, and for half a second, they went out, and there was just the dark shape, taller than the trees on either side of the road, filling the whole width, with a low curve where a head would be, and long, long lines reaching down toward the ditch. Then they blinked back on, same soft blue. I didn't think. I turned the key off and back on. The engine coughed, then roared louder than it normally does. I slammed the shifter into reverse and stomped the gas. The truck lurched backward. The whole cab shook. There was a sound, finally, from outside. This low groan, not animal and not metal, like the noise a big beam makes in a windstorm. The blue eyes stretched upward as I backed away, like they were rising or unfolding. And then they began to shrink. For the first time, distance started to mean something again. They got smaller. They moved away. I didn't check the mirror. I just stared to the front, turned the wheel hard when I felt the ditch starting to edge under one tire, and backed until I felt the truck hit something solid. I think it was that lightning-struck mesquite, but I honestly don't know. I jammed it back into drive, turned around in about 3 tries that should have rolled me, and I headed back the way I'd come, toward town, taking the long route. My hands didn't stop shaking the whole way. When I hit pavement, real pavement with lines painted and everything, I almost started crying. I pulled into a gas station on the edge of Santa Ana, the one with the faded sign and the pumps that always beep at you, and I just sat there. The sun was starting to think about coming up by then, this dull gray behind the clouds. I checked the clock. It said 7:02. That didn't make sense for how far I had gone and turned and come back. I got out to put gas in because my tank was near empty from driving like that. And that's when I saw the side of my truck. There were marks on the passenger side door and along the bed. Not scratches exactly. The paint wasn't peeled. It was more like the color had been pushed around. Streaks in the white, long and curved, up higher than my head, like something had pressed against it and dragged without any weight. I ran my fingers over them. The metal was smooth, no dents, no roughness. It felt normal, but you could see where the white had gone a shade darker in long lines. 5 of them in some places, 4 in others. A guy I know, one of the deputies, saw me at the pump. He came over, asked if I was all right, said I looked pale. I told him I almost slid into a ditch out on that county road, played it off. He laughed and said, "You and half the county on that strip, man." Then he looked at the side of my truck and his face changed. He ran his thumb along one of the lines and said, "What did you hit?" I told him I must have scraped a branch. He shook his head and said, "There aren't any trees that tall in that stretch." I didn't answer. I just finished pumping and went to work because what else was I going to do? Boss chewed me out for being late. I took it. I did the whole day on autopilot, body moving, mind somewhere else, back on that road with those blue eyes hanging in the dark. A couple days later, that deputy called me. Said, "Hey, you hear about the truck out on Devil's Fork?" I told him no. He said they got a call early that morning after the day I saw the thing, from some rancher about a truck just sitting in the road with the door standing open, engine still running. Said when they got there, the hood was warm, but nobody was around. No footprints in the frost either, which is strange because it was cold enough that morning that anything would show. He said they ran the plates, tracked the owner down, and the guy swore up it. Up and down, he was home asleep and his keys were on his table, and he didn't know how his truck got out there. They checked. His keys were there. Sheriff chalked it up to some glitch in the system at first. Wrong plate number, something. But that deputy told me his own eyes saw the match. Same numbers, same letters. He laughed when he said it, like it was a joke that didn't quite land, and then asked if I had been out that way again. I told him no, I wasn't lying. I won't drive that road. Not in the dark, not in the day. I don't even like passing the turnoff on the highway. My hands start sweating on the wheel if I see the little gravel track in my side vision. It's been almost a year now since that morning. I still have the same truck. The marks are still there. I've washed it, waxed it, even had a buddy at a body shop look at it. He said maybe the paint reacted to something, some chemical. Asked if I drove through a cloud of fertilizer or something. I told him no. He shook his head and dropped it. Inside, everything looks normal. But sometimes when I'm driving at night, even on a fully lit road, I hear that dead quiet from that morning sneak back in between the sounds of the engine and the tires. A little bubble of silence, right there in the middle of the noise. It lasts a second, 2 maybe, long enough for my chest to tighten. December is the worst. Folks start putting up lights. Those bright white and blue ones are everywhere now, wrapped around porches, hanging from trees, lining roofs. If I'm walking or driving and I catch a certain shade of blue out of the corner of my eye, my whole body locks up. I have to remind myself to breathe. I can't look straight at them. My niece asked me last week why I don't like Christmas lights anymore. I told her my eyes are getting bad, that they give me headaches. I didn't tell her that when I see a whole row of them, all the same size and lined up neat, my brain stops seeing bulbs and starts seeing something else waiting over a dirt road. I keep the curtains in my trailer shut at night now. I used to leave them open over the sink so I could see the yard light and the neighbor's porch, but I caught myself staring out there one time, thinking I saw a soft blue glow just beyond the reach of the normal light. And I almost dropped a plate from how hard my hands started shaking. I shut the curtain then, and I haven't opened it after dark since. I won't park my truck with the front facing down any long, straight road. It sounds dumb when I say it, but I can't stand the feeling that if I look up at the windshield, I might see a reflection of something behind me, hanging there at the far edge of what I can see, staying the same size no matter how far I go. I know what folks would say if I told them all this. They'd say I was tired, that I drifted into the wrong county road and got myself all turned around and scared, that I saw some weird farm equipment, some tower with safety lights, who knows, that the marks on my truck are from me sliding past a tree and not wanting to admit it. That's why I'm sitting out here behind my trailer at 3 a.m, talking to my phone instead of telling it to anyone else. You don't keep your job and your friends in a small place if you start talking about eyes in the dark that make the clock skip. But I know what I felt. I know the sound of gravel under my tires disappearing. I know the way it feels when distance stops obeying the rules. I know how it feels to be measured by something you can't see clearly. Every time I think about it, I notice some new little detail. The way the radio didn't fade, just cut. The way the heater went from almost nothing to blowing air that didn't feel any warmer. The way the tap on the glass came from the wrong height. The worst part is this: I don't think that road is its only place. Devil's Fork is just where I happen to meet it. Whatever that thing is, I think it moves. I think it follows patterns we don't see. Maybe it only comes around in December. Maybe it only cares about people alone in trucks before sunrise. Maybe it's got rules same as us, only we don't know them. What scares me is that I drove that road for years. I went right past that spot over and over. And it only really noticed me that one morning. Or maybe it noticed me earlier and just waited until it knew I'd keep coming back. That thought gets under my skin, and that something could study you without you ever knowing, waiting to step out in front of you some regular workday when you're in the same worn shirt and drinking the same bad coffee and thinking about nothing more than fence wire. This is why I don't work the early shift anymore. Boss thinks it's because my truck's too old and I don't want to risk hitting a deer in the dark. I let him think that. I take the later runs now, when the sun is up and I can see every fence post and tree clear. I still won't go near that stretch. If somebody asks me to run something out that direction, I say the truck is acting up. I make something up. Anything. You can call me a coward if you want. I don't care. I'm still here to be called names. Every December when it gets cold and the days get short and that same old damp smell hits the air in the mornings, I wake up before my alarm, look at the clock, and if it says 5:15, I can't move for a minute. Feels like I'm back there, watching that number and waiting for the world to tilt again. I don't pray much, never have. But lately, when I hear a long, empty stretch of road calling in the back of my head, when my hands start drifting toward my keys out of habit at some dark hour, and I get the urge to drive for no good reason, I say one thing, over and over, to whatever's out there, or up there, or nowhere. I say, you got that road, you can keep it. You don't need me, because I know if I ever find myself on Devil's Fork Road in the dark again, it won't just stand there and look at me. It already measured me once. Next time, it might decide to see what happens when it doesn't let go. My name's Cody Harrell. I'm from a little stretch outside LaRue in Henderson County, East Texas, and I work as a stockman at the feed store off 175, the one with the faded red sign you can barely read when you are driving past it too fast. And I know how this sounds already. I know it sounds like some made-up story to pass the time, but I'm sitting behind my trailer right now on this plastic lawn chair that sinks on one side because the leg is cracked, and my hands are shaking so bad I keep hitting the wrong button on my phone, and I keep checking over my shoulder even though the only thing back here is a busted burn barrel and some junk tires. And I'm telling you this straight, I am not an author. I am not trying to be clever. I am just trying to say what happened before I lose my nerve again. Because every time I start this, I feel that air from the barn on my neck all over again. And I stop. So I'm going to go from the start, and if I ramble, just stay with me, please. Because if I start in the middle, it will not make sense. And if it does not make sense, I am going to think I made it worse than it was. But I did not. I know I did not. I can still hear it when the frost comes down quiet like it did then, all right. So that winter, I was 17. It was December, right before Christmas break. And that morning, I had 2 pieces of toast with peanut butter because we were out of cereal, and I remember being mad about that, which sounds stupid now compared to everything else. But that is what I was thinking. That and the fact my work shirt had this grease stain on the left side that would not wash out. No matter how much my mom soaked it in that blue stuff, and she told me just wear it. Nobody at the ranch cares if your shirt is clean. And I remember checking the clock over the stove. It said 6:02, the red numbers kind of humming. And I shoved my boots on, even though they were still damp from the day before. And I grabbed that coffee in the chipped white mug with the little rodeo logo almost scratched off, burned my tongue on it. And I was thinking about how I had math homework due, and if I could maybe finish it on lunch break if we got one. And you got to understand, there was nothing special about that morning at all. The sky was that low, cloudy kind. No real color to it. Just flat, and the air had that kind of bite that makes your nose sting. And when I walked out of the trailer, the grass made that little crunch noise under my boots. You know when the frost is light and new, and the truck door stuck like always because the latch never lined upright, and the radio would not even pick up a station at first. It was all hiss. That was how boring it was. It was all the small stuff you never remember, unless something bad hooks itself to that day. And then suddenly, you remember all of it. Down to dumb things like the way the steering wheel felt cold, even through the cover that has that fake leather peeling off. I was driving out toward the ranch, past those little houses with the Christmas lights that never look like the pictures, half of them not even working, and I punched in at 6:43. I remember because the time clock was off by 3 minutes, and my boss always pointed that out like it was a joke that only he understood. And I remember thinking, I wish I could just go to school like a normal kid. But we needed the money, and I was used to it. Feeding, hauling, fixing fences, whatever they needed. And on that ranch, there were a bunch of barns, all numbered in white stencils that had started to fade. Barn 3 with the calving pens. Barn 5 with the equipment. Barn 9 that nobody used much. And then Barn 17, which was back farther than the others, kind of tucked near the tree line where the land dips just a little. You would not even notice it from the main road. It was just another long shape against the mesquite and oak. But everyone on the ranch just called it 17, never Barn 17. I did not think about that until later. Anyway, most mornings we did not go near it, not because of stories or anything, just because that barn was where they stored old stuff, things that were supposed to be sorted out. And honestly, it was just one more building. At least that is what I thought then. I started that day the same as any other. I checked the feed levels. I helped throw square bales from the trailer. My hands were already cracked from the cold and the twine cut into them. And my boss, Mr. Renfro, walked around with that clipboard and yelled numbers I never really tracked properly. And the cattle waited at the fence like they always did, steam coming out of their noses, the calves bawling. And the sun came up slow and weak, more light than warmth, and nothing felt off yet. If you had stopped time right there, nothing in that picture would have told you what was coming. That is important to me for some reason, that nothing was strange at first. The first little wrong thing I noticed did not hit me until later that afternoon when I went out back to grab some fencing wire. You know how dirt gets. When it is cold, it is not mud, but it is not dry either. It holds prints really well, and when you step away from something, you can look back and see every step you took. It was like that around the smaller barns, all boot prints and some dog tracks from the ranch dogs. And then you get to the stretch of ground between Barn 14 and where the fence line starts to curve. And on the other side of that curve, way back a little, is 17. And I am walking there with a coil of wire on my shoulder, thinking about nothing in particular. Maybe the song that was stuck in my head. And I remember kind of squinting because the light hit the ground funny. You know how frost will cling in spots where the sun does not hit yet. So some places were still white, and some were already turning back to brown. And there on that edge, right where the white and the brown met, I saw the tracks. At first I thought it was just deer. We got plenty of deer cutting across that property. But then I really looked, and man, I swear to you, my brain did that thing where it tries to fix what it is seeing and make it normal. But it could not. The prints were long, like a deer or goat, split in the middle. But in between some of them, almost overlapping, were shapes that looked like toes, bare toes, spaced like a person walking, but not right, like whoever it was had their foot twisted or pressed in at a strange angle, and they were mixed, not like a deer went one way and a person went another, but like something was walking that put both shapes down at once. I just stood there with the wire on my shoulder and the cold creeping up my sleeves, and I stared at the ground for longer than made sense. And I remember saying out loud, "No, that is just two sets of tracks on top of each other. That is all. Maybe somebody walked out here without boots for some reason. Stepped in the deer prints," which is a stupid explanation, I know, but your head will grab any excuse when it does not want what it is seeing. And the tracks were fresh too. The edges of them were still sharp. No wind had softened them yet. And they went in a clear path, in a kind of loop around where 17 sat. Not all the way around, but like whatever made them had been pacing in a wide half circle, always keeping the same distance from the barn wall. And then they turned and went straight toward the big doors. And here is the part that made the back of my neck prickle even then. The tracks went right up to where the frost turned to hard ground by the doors. And then there was nothing. Like whoever or whatever stepped there just stopped existing. No sign of it turning. No backtrack. Nothing. I told myself the ground was just too dry to hold the shape, and that was it. But the thing is, I have been around livestock and mud and dust my whole life. You can always see something. A scuff, a dragged heel, just anything. But there was just a clean strip of dirt. I shook it off. I really did. I even laughed a little to myself and thought I would tell one of the other hands later, and we would joke that old 17 finally got a ghost. But I did not. I did not tell anybody that day. And I do not know why. Maybe I already knew somewhere in my gut. It was not funny. I finished my shift. My fingers went numb 3 times and came back. My nose ran. I wiped it on my sleeve. I ate a cold hamburger my mom wrapped in foil for my lunch. The patty was tough and tasted like the fridge. And I checked my phone only to see no one had texted me anyway. All of that regular stuff. And when I clocked out, it was getting dark already. You know how fast it goes in December. Like someone just snaps a blanket over the sky. I drove home, heater barely working, windshield fogging up on the inside. And that should have been it. That should have been another normal day stacked on the pile of all the others. But that night, I was in bed, the one with the broken slat that made the mattress sag. And I had my earbuds in, listening to some football highlights on low volume, and I could not sleep. I kept thinking about those prints. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the mix of them, the clean, sharp line where they stopped, and my mind kept running over new ideas to explain it. Maybe someone was pulling a stupid prank. Maybe one of the guys had a set of fake hooves and was stomping around, but that would still not explain the human toes. I ended up falling asleep sometime after midnight. I remember looking at the blinking alarm clock, saying 12:18 last time, and I woke up at 3:07. I know because I checked. The room was cold. Colder than it should have been with the heater on its low setting. And there was this sound outside. Not loud, not like banging or anything. Just a rhythm. A steady crunch, crunch, crunch. And in my half-asleep brain, I thought it was my neighbor walking around outside his trailer, maybe messing with his truck, and I almost rolled over to ignore it. But then the thought hit me like being dunked in water. That sound, the weird, careful crunch, it sounded the same as walking on light frost, like boots on delicate ice. But it was a harder sound, like more weight. And then my idiot brain decided to picture those tracks again. And I sat up fast, heart pounding. I pulled my earbuds out and held my breath. and I realized the sound was not outside my window. It was just there in my head, or in my memory. It is hard to explain. I did not hear anything through the walls. It was like my mind had gotten stuck on the noise and was replaying it. The way you get a song stuck, only it was footsteps. And that was the first night I dreamed about Barn 17. I was not even working near it in the dream. I was just standing in front of it like I had been dropped there. The doors shut, frost on the ground, and something was walking around inside very slowly. Each step making that crunching sound, even though there was no frost in there. I could not move in the dream. I could only listen. And when I woke up, I was sweating and my throat hurt, like I had been yelling. My mom said at breakfast that I looked like I had not slept at all. And she made me eat scrambled eggs, even though my stomach felt tight. That day at school, I kept zoning out. My math teacher called my name Tuss before I answered. And my friends joked that I looked like I had seen a ghost, which I had not. That is the thing. I never saw anything. And I wish I had sometimes. I wish I could say it was just a shadow, just my eyes, because then I would have something solid to argue with. But all I had then was prints in the frost, a noise in my dreams, and this stupid feeling that had settled in my chest like a weight. I went back to the ranch that afternoon for the second half shift, because I was dumb and agreed to pull doubles that week for extra cash for Christmas. And the closer I got down that back lane toward the barns, the tighter that weight got. I told myself I would not look, that I would just do my job and go home, that whatever I thought I saw was nothing. But of course I looked. You always look, even when you tell yourself not to. When I had a short break, I walked back near where I had seen those tracks. The sun was higher and a lot of the frost was gone. But in the shadow line near 17, there was still a dusting of white, not thick, but enough. And there they were again, not as clear this time, like something had been pacing slower, back and forth between two fence posts. The same mixed shapes, the split hooves and the bare toes, right over each other, like a pattern that was starting to dig itself into the ground. I swallowed hard and my mouth tasted like metal, and I heard myself say, very quietly, "Who is there?" Like I expected someone to answer. No sound came from the barn, not even the creak of wood. It was too still, like when a storm is about to hit, and all the birds vanish, and I backed away without taking my eyes off the doors. I chickened out. I know that. I did not go closer. I did not tell my boss. I did not take a picture. I just walked away and finished my shift and pretended everything was fine. But I kept thinking about something my grandfather used to say before his mind got bad. He used to talk about certain places on land where you just did not build. He would say, the ground remembers things, and it will push back if you put the wrong kind of roof on it. And we always laughed because it sounded like superstition. But standing there looking at 17, I thought, that building is sitting where it does not want to be. And something is reminding it. That was day 2, by the way. I am trying to keep the days straight because it matters. The first tracks, the first dream, then the second set, the second night. I tried to stay up. I drank too much coffee from the gas station, the cheap kind that tastes burnt, no matter how fresh it is. I told myself. If I did not sleep, I would not dream. But that did not work. I do not remember when I drifted off. But I woke up again around that same time, a little after 3. And this time I knew I was hearing a real sound. Not just memory, it was faint. And at first I thought it was my own heartbeat in my ears. But then it lined up with something outside, a steady, measured rhythm, like someone walking in slow circles on gravel. Only there is no gravel outside my trailer. Just dirt and patchy grass. I held my breath again and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. It would pause, then start again. I got up and went to the window, lifted the curtain with 2 fingers, and looked out at the yard. There was nothing there, just my mom's old car under the carport. The neighbor's dog asleep on the porch next door, its chest going up and down. The streetlight further down the road, making that faint buzzing sound it always makes. But the crunching noise kept going in my ears, so clear that I felt like if I reached my hand out, I could feel the vibration in the wall. And I do not scare easy. I will say that I have seen bad wrecks on 175. I have seen animals die ugly when the weather turns wrong, but this was a different kind of feeling. It was like being watched by something that did not care what you were, only that you were there. I ended up turning the TV on and letting some late-night infomercial run until the sun came up, because for some reason the sound stopped when I focused on the voices. Like it needed the silence to get through. I went to the ranch that day with my eyes burning, and I told myself I would not go near the back barns at all. I would stay by the main pens, help fix the busted gate Mr. Renfro kept complaining about. But it did not matter, because the whole place felt different now, like the lines in the dirt had shifted. A couple of the older hands were quieter than usual too. I do not know if they felt it, or if I was just projecting, but nobody was joking much that day. Then about halfway through my shift, Renfro tells me and this other guy, Luis, to go check on some tarps near 17. Said the last windstorm might have messed with them, and he did not want anything getting wet. And I felt my stomach drop, like in a dream where the floor tilts. But I nodded, because what else do you do? Say no and look crazy. We walked back there together, me and Luis, and I was grateful not to be alone. He was talking about a football game. I barely listened. I just watched our breath hanging in the air and counted our footsteps. 1, 2, 3, 4, trying not to match them up with the sound in my head. When we got close to 17, I could see the tarps were fine, still tied down, stiff from the cold. Nothing obvious wrong, but the frost right up against the barn wall was thicker that day, like it had been laid down fresh, even though the rest of the yard was mostly clear. I slowed a little, and Luis kept going. And then he stopped too, right in front of the doors, and said, "Man, you feel that?" I asked what he meant, even though I already knew, and he shrugged and said, "I do not know. It is just colder right here." And he rubbed his arms like he had a chill. I bent down like I was checking the tarp ropes, just so I could look at the ground without him noticing. And there they were again. The tracks, more of them now, a pattern of loops and turns, like someone had paced there for hours. And they still did that thing where they went straight toward the doors and then disappeared, like the barn swallowed them. I said we should go, that the tarps were fine, and Luis did not argue. He just nodded quick and we left. That was the first time I realized I was not the only one who thought something was off with that building. He did not say anything else about it, but the way he walked a little faster, the way he did not look back, that told me enough. That night after work, I sat on the edge of my bed with my boots still on and my work shirt still buttoned, and I told myself out loud that it was nothing. That barns creak, frost plays tricks, minds get tired, all that stuff. I almost convinced myself. I really did. But then the next morning, before the sun was fully up, the call came in. One of the younger hands, a boy named Mason, had not shown up. He was 16, just started a couple months before. Liked to joke that he was going to buy a big truck with his paycheck. Nobody thought much at first, figured he overslept. But by mid-morning, his mom had called the ranch looking for him. Said his bed was made and his boots were gone, and the truck keys were not where they should be. And I do not know if this is true, or something my mind added later, but I swear I saw the way Renfro looked toward the back fields when he hung up that phone. Like the idea had already walked into his head, and he did not want it there. They called the sheriff, small county, everyone knows everyone. Search party talk started, and that is when I made the first big mistake. I did not tell anyone about the tracks. I do not know why I stayed quiet. Maybe I did not want to be the one to say it out loud and make it real. Maybe I thought it was just me connecting things that had no business being connected. A missing kid and some weird prints. That is how you end up sounding crazy. So I kept my mouth shut. I went through the motions. I hauled hay. I filled troughs. And all the while, every chance my eyes got, they slid towards 17. The barn sat there like it always had. Long shadow, big sliding doors, rust stains along the nails. Nothing moved. No sound came from it. Nobody went in or out. And the more normal it looked, the worse it felt. If it had groaned or the doors had rattled in the wind, I think I would have felt better. But it just sat, waiting. That night, the crunching footsteps in my head did not let me sleep at all. This time it was different. It was like they were circling my trailer, going round and round at the same slow pace as those prints had gone around the barn. I got up 3 times and went outside in my socks, breath puffing out, grass stiff under my feet, and there was nothing there, not a mark. My neighbor's dog whined from his porch, but did not bark, which somehow made it worse. If he had barked, it would have felt like something normal was reacting to something weird. But he just watched me, head down on his paws, like he knew to stay quiet. And here is where the night in question really starts, the one that messed me up for good. It was 3 days after I saw the first prints. Mason was still missing. Sheriff had been out twice, asked all the usual questions. My mom kept wringing her hands and telling me not to stay late at the ranch, like that would help anything. And I was on evening duty. We had a cold snap, the kind where the air feels sharp enough to cut your lungs. The sky cleared, which meant the heat just went straight up and left. And by the time I finished stacking the last bales and putting away the equipment, the ground had gone hard again, a thin layer of frost starting to shine under the security lights. Most of the other guys had gone home. It was just me and Renfro and one other older man closing things up. And of course, because that is how this goes, the last thing on the list was to check the lock on barn 17. Make sure nobody had messed with it. Just routine. That was what he called it. Routine. He tossed me the spare flashlight, the one that flickers if you tap it wrong, and told me to go make sure the chain was still in place. Said he would be right behind me after he shut off the main office lights. I did not want to say no. And part of me, the part that was tired of being scared of something I had not even seen, wanted to prove it was all in my head. So I walked back there alone, my boots clicking on the frozen dirt, breath puffing out in uneven clouds, flashlight beam jumping with each step. When I turned the corner past barn 14 and the field opened up towards 17, my feet slowed on their own. I did not tell them to. They just did. The barn looked different in that light. The security lamps threw long shadows that made the open ground look like a sheet of glass with cracks in it. The frost was thicker there than anywhere else I had been on the property that evening. My breath caught because I could already see the depressions in it. Before I was even close, the prints had multiplied. They went all the way around the barn now, a full loop, spaced out with that same measured distance. And in each one, I could see that double shape, the split hoof and the toes, pressed deeper now, like whatever was pacing had gotten heavier or angrier or more real. I do not know. I moved closer because what else was I going to do? My eyes were locked on those marks, and I noticed something else. They were not melting. The frost around them had softened a little, but inside each print, the crystals were still sharp and intact, like the cold lived there specifically. My flashlight beam shook more, and I realized it was my hand, not the batteries, and I forced myself to look away from the ground, to look at the doors, at that chain I was supposed to check. And that was when I saw the thing that took away any chance I had left to pretend this was normal. The chain was looped through the handles, the padlock hanging, but the ends of the chain did not line up the way they had before. There was a twist in it, like someone had pulled the doors outward as far as they could with the lock still on, stretching the metal and then let go. You could see the marks where it had bit into the wood. I stepped closer, and I swear to you, listen to me. The air coming through that tiny gap between the doors and the jamb was warm, just a little, like standing near a vent. It smelled faint, not like animals or hay or oil, but like wet stone and something sweet that had gone bad a long time ago. I took a deep breath and my throat tightened. And that was when I heard the first step, not in my head, not a memory, but from inside the barn, a slow, deliberate shift of weight, wood creaking under it, frost grinding somewhere just under the floorboards. I froze. The flashlight beam pointed at the middle of the doors. And there it was again. Another step, the same rhythm as before, only now I could feel it in my boots, a little tremor coming up through the ground, like something heavy was walking in circles. I tried to call out for Renfro. I really did. I opened my mouth, but all that came out was this thin little sound that did not sound like my voice, like my lungs had decided to give up on me. The steps kept going, slow, measured, circling. I could picture the path, matching the prints I had seen outside. Only now it was inside, wrapped around me. I do not know how long I stood there. It could have been 30 seconds. It could have been 5 minutes. The only way I know time passed at all is because my fingers went numb around the flashlight. Then something changed. The rhythm stopped. It just ceased, and the silence hit just as hard as the noise had. And then, from maybe 3 feet inside the doors, right where the gap was widest, I heard it exhale. One long breath, like someone who had been walking for hours, had finally stopped and turned to face the door. The air coming through that crack warmed my face more, and there was this faint, wet sound in it. I do not know how else to say it, like breathing through something that is not supposed to breathe, that snapped something in me, and I stumbled backward. My heel caught on one of the deeper prints, and I went down hard on my back. The flashlight flew out of my hand and rolled. The beam went sideways and lit up a line of those tracks right next to me. And I watched with my own eyes, one of them deepen, the frost crystals inside it compressing, like something had just stepped there without touching the ground anywhere else. There was no leg, no body, no shadow connecting to it. Just the depression forming, the noise of ice crushing. I scrambled backward like a bug, hands stinging with cold as I pushed myself away. And that is when I finally yelled, a raw sound that ripped out of my throat. I think I shouted for Renfro, maybe for God, maybe for my mom. It all came out tangled, and I did not look away from that print until my back hit the corner of barn 14, and the flashlight beam slid away, breaking the focus. Footsteps came pounding from behind me, real ones, boots on frozen ground, and there he was, Renfro, breathing hard, asking what in the world I was doing on the ground. Did I slip? What was I yelling about? I tried to tell him, right there. I tried to say there is something in there. You can hear it. You can feel it. But the second the words got close to my tongue, the barn went back to being just a barn. The footsteps stopped. The air went cold again. The smell thinned out. And I just sat there shaking, pointing at the ground, at the prints, but they looked the same as before. No fresh one forming in front of us. Just the weird pattern, which was bad enough, but not something you could show and say, "See, this is wrong," in a way that means call someone. He frowned and told me I needed to watch where I was walking. Said those old boards could be slick when the frost came in, and I realized he did not hear anything. He did not feel the floor shift like I did. Or if he did, he was not going to admit it with me. Staring at him like that, he checked the chain, said it was fine. I saw him tug on it a little softer than he needed to, like he did not want to pull too hard. Then he told me to go home, said I looked half sick. I did not argue. I grabbed the flashlight, my hands still numb, and I walked away from barn 17 without looking back, which took everything I had. That should have been the end, right? The moment I decided I was done and never went near it again. But you know already from the way I am talking that it was not. That was just the point where it stopped being something happening at the ranch and started following me. I went home. I sat at the kitchen table while my mom made stew. I could not eat it. The smell of the meat turned my stomach. Usually I would have 3 bowls of that stuff. That is how messed up I was. She kept asking me if I was sick, if I had a fever. I just shook my head and said I was tired. I went to my room early, and I thought if I could just stay awake until the sun came up, I would be okay. That is the dumb bargain you make with yourself when you are scared. Like the daytime can stop something that does not care what time it is. But I tried anyway. I turned the TV on low. I scrolled my phone. My eyes burned, my head hurt, and sometime around 2, I lost the battle and drifted off. Sitting up, my back against the wall, the TV flashing blue and white light on the ceiling. I woke up because my feet were cold. That was the first thing I noticed. They felt like I had left them outside, and then I realized I could not move them. Not because something was holding them, but because my muscles would not answer. My brain was awake. My eyes were open. I could see my own room, The posters on the wall, the pile of clothes on the chair, the TV screen, now black because the sleep timer had turned it off. But my body would not respond. I had heard of sleep paralysis before. Kids at school talking about it. The way you feel pinned down and see things at the edge of your vision. I told myself that was what this was. That my brain was still half dreaming. And if I stayed calm, it would pass. Then I heard it start. Not outside, not distant, but so close it was like the sound was right at the foot of my bed. The crunch of footsteps on frost, slow and heavy, taking their time, circling. Only there was no frost in my room. My carpet is old and thin. There's nothing there to crunch. But every step came with that same sound, that grinding of ice crystals under weight, and the bed frame shivered a little. In time with it, I wanted to close my eyes, but they would not shut. I was stuck staring at the ceiling, and in the corner of my vision, where the room starts to blur, I saw something like steam, low to the floor, not rising like normal, but hugging the ground in a thin line. I could feel the cold creeping up from my feet, into my calves, my knees, like I was lying in snow. Still the steps went on, circling the bed, never hurrying, never tripping. Always the same counted rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each pause making my heart pound harder. I tried to scream, to call out, but my jaw would not open. My tongue felt thick. The only thing that moved was my eyes, darting back and forth, trying to catch sight of what was making that noise. But it stayed just outside where I could see, like it knew exactly where my vision cut off. I do not know how long that went on. All I know is that at some point, the steps stopped behind my head, near the wall, where no one could stand because the bed was pushed up against it. And the cold climbed up my neck, into the back of my skull, and I heard it breathe, that same long, wet, tired breath I had heard through the barn doors. Only now it was inches from my ear, and there was no wood between us. It went on forever, that breath, like it was smelling me, learning me. I felt my eyes fill with tears. They ran sideways into my hair, because I could not blink them away. And right when I thought my chest was going to give out from beating so hard, something changed in the room. A little heaviness lifted. The air warmed just a touch, and I could move again. I jerked up so fast I nearly fell off the bed, gasping, grabbing at my legs like I expected to find frostbite or bruises. There was nothing. My skin was normal. My room was normal. No steam on the floor. No marks. Nothing on the walls. The clock said 3:12. I sat there shaking and listening, but the only sound was the heater kicking on in the hallway. I did not go back to sleep that night. I have not slept right since. And after that, I did not need to be near barn 17 to feel it. That was the worst part. Whatever was pacing around that frost, whatever pushed its way against those doors and let that breath out into my face, it knew me now, like it had found my scent and followed it. I tried to quit the ranch. I really did. I told my mom I was too tired, that my grades were slipping. She thought it was about the missing boy, which I guess, in a way, it was, because a few days after my night with the paralysis, they found his truck. You want to guess where? It was parked on the back service road that runs not too far from 17. Keys still in the ignition. No sign of him in or around it. Sheriff said he must have walked off. Maybe got picked up, maybe wandered. There are a lot of maybes when they do not want to say what else it could be. They never did find him, and they never opened that barn during the search. I watched. I watched every time a deputy came by. Every time someone in a volunteer jacket walked around with a flashlight. Nobody asked for the key to 17. Nobody suggested looking inside, like the barn was not even on the map in their heads, like the area around it folded over itself, and people just stepped around the crease without seeing it. When I realized that, I knew I could not stay there, not just because of what had happened to me, but because whatever that place is, it does not exist for everyone. And the ones who can see it, the ones who can hear the steps, are the ones it will not let go of easily. I gave my notice, such as it was, stammered something about school and needing to focus. Renfro looked at me for a long time, longer than was comfortable. And for a second, I thought he was going to say something real, something like, "I hear it too," or "You did good to get out." But all he said was, "Make sure you turn in your key." And he nodded toward the pegboard where the numbered tags hung. My tag, the one with 17 on it, was already gone. I do not know when that happened. Maybe I lost it. Maybe someone took it. Maybe it never hung there at all, and my mind just filled in that detail. I could not ask. I just put my main gate key down and left. I thought that would be the end of it. Like moving out of a haunted house, you shut the door and you drive away. And that is that. But land does not work like houses. Land does not stay where you leave it, ever since that winter. Every December, when the air gets that certain weight to it and the frost comes in thin and quiet, it starts again. The footsteps. I will be at the store now, stacking bags of feed, and I will feel the cold creep around my boots in a way that has nothing to do with the door being open or closed. And I will hear, faint, under the music and the chatter, that crunch, same rhythm, same patience. Like something is circling the building, following me instead of just the barn. I have moved houses twice since then. I thought maybe if I put enough distance between myself and that land, it would stop, but it has not. The prints show up now in places they have no business being. Last year, after a hard freeze, I walked out to my truck one morning, and there, on the hood, on the thin layer of frost, were those shapes, unmistakable, the long split and the toes, pressed in like something had walked across the metal. No dents, just the prints. My neighbor saw me staring and called out, asked if I was okay. I almost pointed them out to him. I wanted so bad to say, "Do you see that?" Tell me I am not crazy. But when I looked back, they were already fading, faster than they should have, like they realized they had been noticed and pulled themselves back. I wiped my hand across the hood and tried to pretend I had just been thinking about the weather. I flinch when I hear certain sounds now. A shopping cart rolling over gravel, someone crunching ice under their boots. It all makes me jump, and I do not work night shifts, not anywhere, if a job even mentions late hours. I feel my chest tighten and I walk away. My mom says I am wasting my chances, that plenty of people work nights just fine, but I cannot be in a quiet place after dark without feeling like there is a circle being walked around me. Patient. That is the worst part. It is patient. Whatever it is. It did not rush me that night behind those barn doors. It did not slam into the wood or howl. Gee. It just kept walking until it knew I was listening. Then it breathed on me and let me go. Like it was just saying hello, like it had marked me. I used to think about going back, just once, in daylight, standing in front of 17 with a camera, a recorder, something, anything to prove to myself that it is real or that it is not. But every time that idea starts to get strong, the steps get louder in my head. Not outside, but right behind my thoughts. And I feel that warm, damp air touch at the back of my neck again. And I let the idea go. The ranch is still there. As far as I know, people still work it. They feed the cattle. They fix the fences. They talk about football and weather and money. I wonder sometimes if any of them stop and look at the frost around barn 17. If any of them see the way the prints never melt right. If maybe someone else is standing where I stood, listening to something walk circles in the dark. Maybe that is the point. Maybe it is not about one person at all. Maybe it is about that building, sitting where it should not. And every so often, when the season is right, something inside takes a step and waits for someone who can hear it. I am telling you this now because last night, it got closer again. I had almost made myself believe it was fading, that the years had dulled it. But I woke up at 3:04, heart already racing. And before I was even fully awake, I knew how cold my feet were. And I knew I could not move. And the first step landed somewhere near the kitchen. I could feel it in the floor, the crunch that does not belong on worn linoleum. Then another, closer, unhurried, like always. I lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, counting the rhythm as it came down the hall, past the bathroom, past the closet, stopping outside my bedroom door. There was no reason for there to be frost inside my house. The heater was running. The weather outside was not even that bad yet. But the air coming under the door felt like it had come straight from the ground behind that barn, and then instead of circling the bed, it did something new. It stepped, or whatever it does, straight up to where my head was, ignoring walls, ignoring space. The cold took the shape of fingers wrapping around the back of my skull. I felt each point of contact like ice pushed into my skin, and in that second, I knew this is not over. It is not fading. It has just been learning, getting braver, or maybe I have just been getting weaker. The breath that came then was not long this time. It was short and close and almost a laugh, even though there was no sound in it, just a feeling, like it was pleased when I could finally move. I sprang out of bed and turned every light on in the house. I have not turned them off since. I am outside now, behind my trailer, the night pressing in around the yard, my phone screen the only bright thing in front of me, and I can still hear faint footsteps somewhere at the edge of where the light reaches. I am telling you all this because I do not know what else to do. I do not have an ending where I say I found out what is in there, or I got rid of it, or I burned the barn down. Nothing like that. Barn 17 is still standing. Those doors are still there. That chain is probably still twisted the way I saw it. And something is still pacing when the frost comes. I do not go near barns anymore if I can help it. If a building has a number on it higher than 10, my stomach flips. I cross the street. I make excuses. People think I am just weird about farm stuff, even though I grew up in it. They do not know that when December hits and the ground turns white right before dawn, I stand at the window and watch for prints, I tell myself. If I see them first, maybe I have a chance. Maybe I can lock the door, put something between us. But deep down, I know it does not care about doors. It pulled the warmth from a locked barn and from my own room. It circled me in my own bed. I am not telling you this to scare you for fun. I am telling you because maybe you work somewhere alone at night. Maybe you have a building on your place that always feels a little colder than it should. Maybe you have heard what you thought was just your own footsteps echoing back when you turn a corner, and you laughed it off, and you should. You should laugh it off as long as you can. But if you ever walk out on a winter morning and see prints in the frost that do not make sense, that look like they could belong to two things at once, and they stop right at the door of a place that has been there longer than you have been alive, do not follow them inside. Do not stand there listening for the next step, because once you hear it clearly, once you feel that breath on your skin, you are not standing in front of a barn anymore. Not really. You are standing right where I am now, at 3 in the morning, behind some cheap trailer siding, with nowhere left to go, listening to footsteps in the frost that are not touching the ground, and knowing they are never going to forget the sound of you.